Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Been a while. Happy Friday. Happy weekend. We've got a lot to talk about. Hello to Seba. Hello to Gosu. Gosu pointing out that ROK YouTubers are never on time. I'm only 5 minutes late today. That's pretty good for me. 5 minutes late is pretty freaking good. But the only reason I'm only 5 minutes late is because I scheduled this stream super late. Woke up late, got going late. But we are live, and we are doing it. Thank you all for being here. Please throw a like on the stream. The early likes help a lot to get people to tune in. As you can see, I'm going to try to maybe, move around a little bit less with my mouse. We are here on the King of All Britain map. Our allies are holding the Ziggurat version on this map. It's called the Southwell Minster. It has the same stats as usual. Our allies are going to capture the Zig. They're going to get the star. They simply had better stats than we had in this KvK, and that was the end of the discussion. Basically, we said we were going to go by stats, and they had better KP than we did. But this was a very nice win for us. We won Kingsland in about 12 hours or so. Things were looking good right from the start. Our allies, our Chinese allies in 698, they actually built maybe one flag, and then they canceled their skillful craftsman by casting a different skill. I think they cast counteroffensive. That canceled their skillful craftsman, so they had a very, very bad start over here on the left. Our start here was fine towards the Zig, but it was really our allies who just dominated their half of the map in the first hour, where they just flagged way better than the enemies. And maybe 92 hours into this Kingsland, while the fighting was very intense and very close in our area, we could see just from the progress our allies were making that what had been an easy KvK the whole time was going to also be an easy Kingsland. We won every zone pretty cleanly, and it was just a really nice win. It was a relaxing win. After over a year of having either super intense KvKs or KvKs where we had no chance of winning, this was a KvK where the matchup was fair and we were very confident, and then it was just smooth sailing the whole time. And that's my favorite kind of KvK. I think I said somewhere along the way in Kingsland, I said on voice, I was like, I loved this KvK. This was so much fun. For me, this is perfect. I know other people want a more difficult KvK. I can certainly understand that. But I just like it when everybody's in a good mood the whole time. There's not a lot of stress. Your life doesn't get very affected. And you win. So that is the good news. That is the good news of what has happened in the last couple weeks. The bad news is that after we won, a day or two later, our R5, Adinavo, our longtime R5, someone who I've played the game with for 6 straight years. He did decide to retire from Rise of Kingdoms. Another one of our longtime leaders, Idun, she also retired. Another longtime leader, Eli, he retired a couple weeks earlier. And we're going to miss all these people. You can see that Idun has, very good stats as well. Lots of Ark of Osiris wins. She was, a longtime officer alongside Addy, myself, and others. But losing Addy is going to be the really big deal for this kingdom. He was the unquestionable R5, the unquestionable person who did the most to make our kingdom go forward, but also was the best player, the best strategist, had the best temperament. And, there are rumors. He's leaving for personal reasons. He hasn't said what those personal reasons are. I respect him enough to not ask. I am gaining on him in kill points. You see that he's got 10.4 billion KP. At this point, I'm up to 9.9 billion KP. I've been gaining on Addy in kill points for a couple of years, or maybe at least the last 18 months or so. And so it is possible that Addy quit because he didn't want me to pass him in kill points. That hasn't been confirmed. That's just a rumor going around in the ROK community. It is what it is. I can understand not wanting to get passed by your boy after being ahead of me in kill points for years. If that's what drove him away, then yeah, it sucks to suck, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I basically try to see this as a good thing. I think Addy went out on top. Like, this was a really good KvK for us. We played very well. In Zone 5, we were against a pretty good camp here in Mercia. 2650 is a kingdom that has won. Well, they've got 3 stars, but they also played very well in the KvK earlier this year. The big 2377, 2429 KvK. 2650 was one of the supporting alliances that did very well in that KvK. MCM is a Japanese kingdom. Only 1 star here, but they're a solid kingdom as well. They played very good defense. If you look at the alliance kills, you can see that 2650 is in 3rd place in kills. We're in 4th place. Our allies, the Chinese, in 1698, they're in 2nd. We certainly had the advantage in Zone 5, but I mean, we won it in 12 hours. Like, we just absolutely won this zone so cleanly. And then we also cracked their forts at the level 7 passes. Usually level 7 passes are a stalemate, but in this KvK, we did burn down a number of their forts before Kingsland opened. It wasn't like really meaningful at all, but we got some decent trades on those. I will be making some videos of like a pretty crazy pass rally we did, where we got a 2-for-1 trade against them on a 90-minute to 2-hour-long rally. Looks like we are building a flag here, which is good. Oh, is this a slow build flag? Oh, just a slow build flag, but yeah, Addy's absence is being felt pretty quickly, where we're a little bit slow on some of our building. We need to figure out, someone needs to sit down and figure out exactly if we need to build anywhere else. But yeah, just a good KvK, but really a big bummer that Addy is leaving. I started the game with Adinavo back in Kingdom 131. I just was playing this game randomly. I wasn't gaming at all at the time. This was 6 years ago. I was not playing games at all. I thought I was done with video games. And I just happened to still be subscribing to Gecko Gaming and watched a video of his about Rise of Kingdoms. I thought it looked cool. I was like, all right, I'll download this game for a day or two, and then I'll delete it. And I'll be like, I'll feel good about myself for being productive. I'll be like, okay, for a day or two, I was not doing anything productive in my life. I was just playing this game. But then I'm going to quit the game, and I'll feel really good when I do that. That was like my pattern for many years. Like, get involved in a game, then quit it very quickly. I joined an initial alliance. That alliance broke up. And Addy's face, I think it was maybe the same avatar as he has now. Yeah, you know, this handsome face just popped up and was like, would you like to join this alliance? And so I just joined it, still thinking I'm going to quit the game in a day or two. We had some, at that point, you know, you play the game for a couple days and realize, oh, this is actually a pretty good game. So I stuck with it a little bit longer. And then I realized about a week into the game, we had some wars, we had done some fighting. I realized, wow, this guy leading this alliance is actually a good leader. He's actually a good leader. I have no desire to lead in this game. I don't want to like commit a lot of time or energy to a game, but considering this guy is such a good leader, I might as well keep playing. You know, why not? Let's just keep playing this game and see what happens. You know, that was 6 years ago, and it has been just an amazing journey to go on with Addy and this alliance, the Handsome Devils. You know, he and I have both been a part of this alliance the whole time, and we've built it from something very, very small to something very, very big, very successful. And, you know, like I said, I choose to view this as a good thing for Addy. I think he, you know, as we all do at some point, we need to move on with our lives. We need to get involved in other things. And I don't think there's anything left for him to accomplish in this game, right? We have won all sorts of different KvKs. And hello to everybody in the chat. Alish, Seba, Irgandir. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to get this, you know, this tribute to Addy out right at the start here. We've won a lot of different kinds of KvKs in this game. We won the original KvK 2, like the very first, we lost the first KvK, the very first KvK we lost. KvK 2, we got a much fairer matchup. We were in the 5th largest KvK 2. Our alliance, the Handsome Devils, was still very small. We were like the 5th or 6th smallest alliance on our server. They didn't even give us teleport space into Zone 5. We just hopped a mountain without asking anyone. We played a huge role in Zone 5 and having like a really good start in that zone. We played a huge role later on in the win. And that was, for me, the first time that I had led a group for about 8 hours. I think Addy was like at work or something. So when the passes opened, I led a group for about 8 hours. It was this like long campaign where we, you know, we hopped the mountain, we flagged very quickly across the map, and, you know, without any resistance, we eventually started hitting one of the enemy's farm alliances. That caused their leadership group, this was like a Chinese kingdom that we were playing against. It was, I have a spy here, so I can tell you what kingdom it is. It was 1260, Kingdom 1260. Their leadership group teleported over to deal with us, this tiny alliance that no one knew. We then very smartly retreated. We were like, we cannot fight these guys. Let's just fall back. Later on that night, because we still had territory, we ended up creating a double rally with one of our main alliances on this very aggressive fort that the Chinese placed. The fact that we had that territory and the fact that we could double rally them is what brought that fort down. I still remember after we brought the fort down, seeing all these Chinese leaders teleport right onto our territory, start burning us, where it was like they had made this decision that, why did we let this annoying little alliance do all this stuff to us today? We need to take these guys out right now. Let's ignore everything else. Let's get rid of these really annoying small players. And for me, I was kind of hooked on the game even more so at that point, because it was like a full day of us doing a lot of stuff as a team, and and having an impact, having like a real impact on war. And since then, Addy has led us to having an impact on a lot of wars. We won a 2 versus 6 Strife of the 8. We won an incredible comeback Strife of the 8 where we were losing for like 20 days, and on day 23 or 24, we ended up winning. Our allies then betrayed us for the star, and we got kicked all the way out. We then had our best migration ever from one of the enemies that we fought, and those people are still a huge part of the kingdom. We beat we beat 1818 and 1903 in like a very smooth victory about a year ago. Earlier this year, we had a huge upset win against 2268, and ultimately contributed to the demise of that great Imperium kingdom. I think even at the time, Addy and I were like, this is really nice to have this scalp on our mantle, to have the 2268 scalp on our mantle. And, then now we won. Not only did we win this KvK very smoothly, but even in our last KvK, we had a kind of a 1v1 against 2975's camp in Zone 5 in the last KvK. We beat them in a single day, just owned them in that zone. And Addy was the leader of all of that. He accomplished all those things. He built, honestly, one of the longest running and most successful English-speaking teams in this game. I don't think he has anything left to prove, and so he can move on and just, feel good about everything that he did in the game. And I'm very glad that I have made videos about a lot of the stuff that we did in this game, so that if someday he wants to go back and watch them, he can. I don't know if that's something he'll do. I know that when I'm much older, I will go back and watch my content and be like, this was one of the coolest things I ever did in gaming. I did it with some of my closest friends in gaming that I've ever made in gaming. And that's a big reason I started this YouTube channel, was to just record the memories of the things we had done in Rise of Kingdoms, because I've accomplished a lot in other games in the past, and I don't have those memories anywhere. Those memories only exist in my head. Like the really big wins that I had in Quake 3 with my team, I only remember those things in my head. I would love to have a recording of me, owning somebody like 04, grabbing the red armor, going and getting the quad, and pulling an upset win against Clan 519 back in the day. Like, I remember that stuff only in my head. I would love to watch it, and hopefully Addy appreciates that as well someday, because we wouldn't have been able to do any of this without him. And yeah, he was just a great leader. Irgendir says 2268 was a classic KvK, one of the best of the year. Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad we won that KvK. I don't think we had to have won that KvK. I think our enemy made some mistakes there. Maybe they could have won it, but we played really well in that KvK, and we put ourselves in a position to win it. And yeah, I think that win, Irgendir, that really changes. It changes the way I think about this game. I'm pretty sure it also changes the way Addy thinks about this game, because that's the kind of KvK that really showed us what we were capable of, or showed the world what we were capable of. And, after that KvK, Chadsky, who was really the MVP of 2268 in that KvK, he sent like a really nice message to Addy where he was just really praised Addy's leadership and praised sort of the way that we had outplayed our opponents in some ways. I don't remember exactly what Chadsky said, but he just gave Addy a lot of credit for what Addy did in that KvK. And, that was like a really nice note to receive from one of the opponents that you really respect, where it's like, okay, it's one thing in this game to have like the community know who you are, and the community respect you, and the community like think your team is good or whatever, but I think really it's about like the impression you leave on your opponents and the impression you leave on your teammates. because nobody else really knows, right? Like later on in this stream, we're gonna watch the 2489 1960 KvK. We'll look in on it. We'll give our opinions about what's happening, but ultimately, we don't know what's going on there. We don't know who's playing well, who's playing bad. We don't know who's treating each other well, who's treating each other badly, who's having fun, who's not. It's really just the people who are involved who know those things. And I think for that reason, that's the reason why like Addy leaving is hitting people like quite hard, is because he was like really, really fun to play with. He was just the heart and soul of what we accomplished in the game. And it is going to be difficult to replace him. And it does sort of put the future of 770 in question to an extent. Alish says, who will replace your past leader? I mean, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to do it by committee. If I were to describe the plans for 770 at this point, it's just that we're finishing up this KvK. We've got about 15 days left on this map. We're going to try to chain barbs, do forts, build up our accounts that way. We're going to collect some decent rewards. We're going to collect a good chunk of autarchs. Although we're going to have to, figure out who gets the autarchs. And then we're going to prepare for our next KvK, right? The vast majority of the kingdom is committed to doing another KvK and seeing how it goes. There's no way we'll be as good without Addy as we were with Addy. But at the same time, I mean, I think we could have won this KvK without Addy. I think if Addy were gone in this KvK, I think we would have won it. It would have been different. We would not have won it as easily. But I think I think we still would have won it, right? We had good allies, we had good campmates. Maybe one of our campmates could have done the territory design. Maybe one of us could have done a more rudimentary territory design. And I think we still would have won. Like we would have won a KvK like this, and everyone would have been happy. We all would still be playing together. And I think that would be like a really big win for us, is if we can keep the kingdom together and play KvKs that are at our competition level, keep playing with this really good group of friends that we formed, and continue to have success in the game while not going crazy in terms of like leadership affecting our lives negatively and stuff like that. That's the optimistic outcome. I do think it's going to be hard to get to that point, though. I can say for myself, like, I really enjoyed leading with Addy. I enjoy leading at the level that I'm at now, but I'm not really looking to, move up to I'm not looking to put more work into this game and have more stress at this point. Just because Addy left. And other people have already stepped up. There's some people who are like former R5s, like Anna, who is volunteering to be an R4 now. Captain you realize that she needs to step up. Other people like that guy are stepping up. Seba, who was in the chat earlier, said he's going to give everything he can as an R4. There's a lot of people who want to keep this thing going. And, one nice thing about what Addy has done is I think he left at the right time, which is where we're still in this KvK. And we have a lot of time to prepare, basically. Like, we have a lot of time to absorb this news and then figure out what we want to do next, right? So we have time. And I think really this is all going to get answered with time. It's going to get answered in the off season. Can we do all the things in the off season that we need to do? Can we put together stats, the results of the statistics for this KvK? Can we then properly plan out the mightiest governors? recruiting is going to be difficult because we don't know what the future of the kingdom is. So like it's going to be pretty hard to recruit new people in. And then we'll go into the next KvK and then we're going to see what happens, right? We're going to see like who steps up in what ways. Are we going to be able to fill all the gaps that Addy's and Aidan and Eli are leaving? And if things go well, people might say, hey, let's keep going. Let's see like let's try to like recruit some people in. Let's try to recruit some leaders in. And like, let's try to keep it going. The other possibility is that people will say, all right, it's just not the same without Addy. We're nowhere near as good as we were. No one is stepping up to the extent that people need to step up. And then people will start migrating out. I think those are both possibilities, but you know, we're going to see what happens basically. I'm like basically open to both. I think there are some people who really want to make things work in 770. I think their incentives are that they would want 770 to continue, because obviously if we did migrate, we couldn't take everyone with us. So there are some people who really want to stay and want this to work, which is great because their incentives are to make it work. There are others, I think, who would be fine with going somewhere else, having someone else lead us, and just like, you know, still playing with a group of friends, but like having less pressure. I'm very much in the middle. Like I see pros and cons to both, basically. I would like 770 to continue. And, you know, largely because like I have so many friends here and so many people who I like here, and I would hate to leave people behind. But at the same time, I don't want to do more in this game. I do a lot in this game. I have a lot of stuff going on outside of this game. And so it's just, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. You know, we have like a super, listen, Addy leaving is a big deal in the game for the fact that like the talent pool that exists in 770 is like really significant. I think this is probably the most significant talent pool that has, like, we're not on the market, but like we're near the market. We're market adjacent right now. And so like the talent pool here is really, really significant. You know, some leaders have already reached out and been like, hey, what are your plans? So, you know, so the thing is, like, what I'm getting at is, like, if there's someone out there who wants to lead a kingdom in this game, there is an army here that you can lead. Like, there is a great army here in 770 that you can lead. And we are very open to someone coming in, a knowledgeable, dedicated person who wants that R5 role, you know, who wants the responsibility of like doing diplomacy, you know, really paying attention to the KvK schedule and like knowing when the passes are opening, and like, you know, being online like almost certainly when passes open, having some of that wartime leadership duty. There's a lot of people here who can help you. There are a lot of people here who can help you. What we really need is one person to take ownership of our success. And, you know, that role is open, and you can certainly reach out to me and we can talk about it. If you're someone who's really motivated to be a leader in Rise of Kingdoms, it would literally take you years and a lot of very good luck to build an army as good as the army in 770. We have everything. We have open field, we have rallies, we have garrisons, we have leaders, we have a community of people that get along really, really well. We've got, you know, we're in the domain system, we have a ton of farms, very well built kingdom, lots of alliance credits, lots of farm alliances. Like, we have everything that a leader would need. We just don't have that leader. Like, that's all we're lacking right now is that leader. Seba's saying let's recruit 1093 leader. Yeah, I mean, you know, listen, we would love to have a leader from 1093 here for sure. I think we're open to all sorts of possibilities. You know, things are very much in the air right now. Things are very, very much in the air right now. Ketanar says, I can be king, but will you give me the RSS? Yeah, I mean, there's like so many things that the leadership in this game does, right? Like, I mean, I spend a lot of time transferring resources to people from the bank and stuff. Seba also spends a lot of time doing that, but you know, there are so many different things that need to get done in this game. And when Addy left, he did say, I'll quote one thing he said in his departure message. I think maybe this was only in the, he had a different message for the leadership group, but he says, the truth is the stress of leading is far too much. Lilith will have to address this going forward as it is simply ridiculous. So I do hope that things change in this regard in order to keep the game healthy. Yeah, it's crazy, right? It's crazy. I mean, we've got 100 people in this kingdom who want to stay in this kingdom. But the question is, do we have the person or persons at the top who can just keep us operating at like this really good level? And yeah, I mean, like, I'm speaking from experience when I say, like, I don't want to be that person, right? I've been close enough to that role for long enough. I've sacrificed so much of my life for this game and for this alliance. Like, I just don't want to do more. I know that I don't want to do more. I can be firm about that right off the rip. I'm willing to do the same amount, and I mean, I'll do more on the edges if that's going to keep this kingdom going, for sure. But yeah, I mean, and we have other R5s, like former R5s, who are like very dedicated, like super, super good players who are just like, they don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to be the leader anymore. And totally understandable, completely understandable that Addy wanted to retire. Like, I don't begrudge him one iota for leaving. And it's just a ton, man. It's just a ton of responsibility, pressure, time, and mental energy to lead in Rise of Kingdoms. So, yeah, I mean, we here in 770, we're a work in progress, as many, many other kingdoms are as well. Different kingdoms do it differently, right? Like, you know, 2650, they're like German kingdom, and they played very well. I really enjoyed playing against them. I know I've said, like, I maybe have sounded a little bit disrespectful early on in this stream, but at the end of the day, this was one of the most enjoyable and friendly KvKs we've played in a very, very long time. 2650 and their allies were very like friendly opponents, very smart opponents. They played super smart, and in their uptime, they were tough to deal with. We had some really, really good open field fights in this KvK. I will be making some videos about that stuff. And so in their uptime, they were very tough to deal with. They did burn some of our flags. They did destroy some of our flags. And they did cause us some stress on voice chat as we were fighting against them. But like the way they decided to do things, the way their leadership decides to exist in this game, is that they're going to play hard as a, you know, really large group for like 12 hours. And then for 12 hours, they're going to log off, go into downtime, and put up very little resistance, you know? So their team and their leadership is sort of making a decision that they're going to put 12 hours a day into the game, but they're not going to put 24. And something that Addy did many times was he put 24 hours into this game. He would be online for 24 hours straight when a pass opened in order to get us off to the right start, and in many cases in order to just like straight up win the zone in those 24 hours. So, you know, there are imperfect leaders everywhere in this game. You don't really see too much of that imperfection unless you're actually part of it, but you know, all leaders and leadership teams are making compromises with what they do. And so like we're in the same boat as everybody else at this point, really. Like we went from having a 10 out of 10 leader to now we're just sort of struggling like everybody else. The reality is that most kingdoms that struggle with leadership, they do eventually fall apart. We see kingdoms fall apart in this game all the time. So we're kind of in that mix now of everybody else, this very uncertain future. And, you know, we've basically been very spoiled in 770, where our group has stayed together this entire time. At this point, most players in this game have seen their original group or their long-term group fall apart at least once. Like, most people have had to transition. Why is my march going that way? This has to be a faster way, right? You know, most people have, like, you know, had to migrate and like basically join a new group of friends. That's what most people have had to do at least once in ROK, if not multiple times. I'm fortunate enough to have never had to do that. I'm still with the original group I was part of. But, you know, everything good does come to an end, and we're just gonna have to see what happens, basically. Keaton, as far as the deal of you becoming the leader in exchange for RSS, we'll have to talk further. Yeah, I'm not. We're not just gonna like accept some rando to lead our kingdom, but you know, we're open to it. We're open to it, right? We're open to it. And like I said, this is like one of the best armies in the game. If you're somebody who is like a very skilled leader who wants to lead in this game and wants to have like a leadership team supporting you, you might not find a better opportunity than this ever in our Rise of Kingdoms, right? Because we're not an Imperium. We're not like super high pressure. We're just, you know, a very capable group that wants to keep playing together. Goku Addy's quitting completely. Yeah, he's quitting completely. Yep. It sounds like he's making a clean break of it. So yeah, that's the play he's making. And I certainly understand that, right? Like Addy could never say, I'm going to step down as leader but stay in 770. I think that would be impossible. We would just inevitably look to him as a leader still. And I'll say that I am in like a somewhat similar position. I mean, I actually stepped down as leader a year ago when the company I was working for shut down. And I thought I was going to probably be done with this game. Obviously, I'm still here. Obviously, I'm still a leader in 770. It's kind of the same thing for me, right? Like, if I wanted to step down as a leader and like just not be a leader anymore, I would have to go somewhere else, just because like the people here they just look at you a certain way, and it's very hard for people to look at you differently. So I think, you know, Addy could make a choice down the road to migrate somewhere else and just play as a regular player. And, you know, he could also decide to come back. I'm not going to put a percentage on it in public, like what percentage I would say of Addy coming back. He could come back and be like, hey, I want to have a reduced role, and I know I would accept that. Like, I would respect what he wants and sort of, you know, treat him accordingly. I think most others would as well, but it's still very tough, right? It's very tough for like the main leader of a kingdom to be like, someone else take the reins, but I'm going to still be here. That's like really hard to do. So I think he just decided that the only really good way to do this was just to retire completely. And like I said, I very much respect that and think he did it in a really good way, honestly. Sawtooth says merge with Bus's group. You know, I thought about Bus Drivers group as a possibility. You know, I mean, listen. It's up in the air, right? It is very up in the air, but there are some groups out there that we could migrate to. The biggest thing for me, and I'm probably not going to be the final decision maker on this, although I probably will. Listen, first and foremost, I am going to give 770 a chance. I don't want to assume anything about the extent to which other people and myself will step up in our next KvK or two. I'm not going to assume anything about that. And so I don't want to like doubt the possibility of this still working. That being said, I think we will have some very good options. I've thought about a few popped into my head immediately. I mean, 3 groups popped into my head immediately. 2 of those leaders have already contacted me. And then I also, I thought about Bus's group. I actually did, I think, I was like, you know, we could merge with Bus Driver's group and see how that goes. You know, the biggest thing for me is going to be, I'm going to want a kingdom where they're going to take a lot of us. The more people that a kingdom can absorb, the better. We have enough talent where like the bottom of our list is still going to be very good, and the bottom of our list are going to be like very, very close friends. So if we get to that point, that's what we're going to be looking for, but we're pretty far from that point. You know, we're going to play the next KvK, try to do well in that KvK while at the same time thinking about our future. The reality is that a lot of people need time to get passports anyway. Welcome that guy to the chat. That guy, he was one of the main leaders in our last KvK, and he's, you know, I think he and I are pretty similar in what we're looking for, actually. I don't want to go somewhere super competitive, and I think that's what that guy said last night as well. And then I think we're also both very open to making things work in 770. It looks like that guy has already rejected Khitan as the new king. Bus is in 1392. Yeah, Bus is in 1392. You know, they just went there a couple months ago. So they're still figuring things out in that kingdom. Man, I was about to say something. I don't remember what it was now. But yeah, I mean, like, so like where I'm at with all this is that Win Trong, thank you for subscribing. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for being here. Yeah, like, so where I'm at with this is like, this does open up the possibility for me to have more fun in this game. Like, I enjoy being a leader. It's rewarding, but I have gotten a little frustrated with it lately. And if you're someone who if you're someone who enjoys my content, but you are not a member of 770, then this news is basically a good thing for you, right? Because there's a decent possibility that I go from being a leader first to being a YouTuber first. You know, right now the spectrum for me in this game is basically leadership is first priority, playing the game is second priority, YouTuber is third priority. I might invert that and be like, playing the game, or YouTube is number 1 priority, playing the game is second priority, leadership is third priority. If I were to migrate, that would be how I would do things. And in all honesty, that I would have more fun doing that. I would definitely have more fun. It would be rewarding to like focus on YouTube for a while and see what that's like. You know, I would love to do a 12-hour stream where I'm just hanging out on the stream all day, fighting in the open field, you know, do a little garrisoning here and there. I'm listening to voice chat, but talking to you all. Like, I've never been able to do that, and I think that would be really fun. I think I would have really good streams doing that, where I could talk about the war as sort of like a third party in a way. You know, in this war, for example, I really just... I could have streamed Kingsland, for example, but what I chose to do was just... By the way, I will say, for some reason... Oh, I know why. I was chaining... I think I chained with Zug Herman there, not Zug Richard. I think that's why that March died, but... You know, basically, like, I could have live streamed in Kingsland, but we were having a lot of fun on voice, and I just made a decision that I wanted to just hang out on voice with my team. You know, like, we were having fun. it's one of the most enjoyable things I do in my life is like hanging out on voice while we're fighting, while we're winning. Everyone's chill. Like it's, I mean, we weren't totally chill because we were, we were getting burnt in some spots, but we knew we were going to win. So like everyone was having a good time. And then like once the enemy surrendered, we still had a lot of cleanup work to do. Like I grabbed a beer out of the fridge. That guy had already started drinking. A few of us got drunk on voice and we just hung out pretty much, for several hours, just having fun, right? And I do enjoy doing that for sure. But I could also hang out with the stream, honestly. I could also hang out with the stream. Some of my friends are here in the chat, Others would join in on the chat. Maybe we would start our own voice chat. Like a separate voice chat, kind of like Chisel does sometimes. Yeah, I still have a lot of fun with many aspects of this game, so we're just going to keep grinding. We're just going to keep grinding this out and see where the future takes us. I mean, a year ago at this time, I didn't check this before the stream, but a year ago at this time, my life was very uncertain and I was not in a good place because the company I worked for shut down and I was starting my own company and I had no idea if that company was going to work out or not. It has worked out well. It's been a good first year for my business, and I look back to where I was a year ago and it's like, okay, my life is much different now. My life is definitely better. We've had a good year in ROK. I had a good year as a YouTuber in ROK. I got to do the Osiris League coverage, which I super, super enjoy doing. My business did good. My investments did good. I'm in a good place. And how did I get there? Like, how did I go from a very uncertain place to a happy place? I just grinded. I just worked hard. I made good decisions. I, mostly stayed away from drinking and smoking. I kept all that stuff in a very heavy moderation. And I just worked my butt off. And so that's what I'm just going to keep doing, right? I'm just going to keep working my butt off in Rise of Kingdoms and out, make smart decisions, treat people around me well. That's something I can still do better at is having good relationships with people, treating people well, maintaining those bonds. Just keep bettering myself as a person, grinding forward. And I think ROK is going to work itself out one way or another. And I'm open to whatever possibility there is. Algebra, welcome to the stream. Algebra had another very good KvK in 1770. He is one of the, very big talents that we have here. I will go ahead and show you guys the KvK stats. Just to give you a sense of like why the allies are getting the star and that sort of thing. Let's see. Here we go. So let's see if I can zoom this out a little bit. Let me turn off the chat real quick. Yeah, so this is Seba. Thank you for the membership. Very much appreciated, my man. Welcome back to Officer Chat. Yeah, so this is the... All right, I'm gonna have to do it like this, so you can see the KDs over here on the left. I mean, I guess we can do it like this, right? This tells us most of it right here, right? So these are the camps, and these are the stats. I'm actually not sure if this is including Kingsland or not. But you can see that we're Wessex here. This is not Kingsland. I wish I had the better updated stats. Let me see if Addy messaged these to me. I don't think he did, but this doesn't include Kingsland, unfortunately. If anybody has the Kingsland stats, let me know. Uh, does anybody have more updated stats than this? I mean, what you're seeing here is that we have virtually identical. We have virtually identical KP to our campmates in 1698. 2650 has more KP than us, and then on the other side of the map, everyone has more KP. The fight on the other side of the map simply lasted longer, and so they just got more fighting in, right? Like we beat our enemies so quickly from an objective point of view that we were just not able to get as much KP as our allies, which is totally fine. Our allies played very well, especially 2941. I had not heard of 2941 before this KvK, but I mean they did very well, right? Like they have the most KP in the KvK. They also had the most deads. You can see that our allies had like 2x more deads than we had. You know, they didn't have 2x the KP, but they had 2x the deads. Our enemies in 2650 also had quite a few more deads than us. More KP as well. So that's how the stats kind of broke down. You know, I did get to 30 million kills. You know, not a big deal. I have 1.2 million deads, but I'm going to be honest and say that about half of these are open field deads. I played very sloppy in the open field. I filled up my hospital a couple times. I literally rallied one time this whole KvK, and I was so used to having my marches stand under the garrison, like I would just stand on the garrison when other people were rallying, that when I rallied, I just stood under the garrison, and I'm like sitting there and I eventually noticed my health bars are going down, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm in the wrong alliance because I'm the one actually rallying. So I took like 240k open field deads on that mistake. But yeah, I mean, I got you know, I'm like 177th in kill points, 196th in heals, positive ratio, nothing too crazy. You know, White Castle for our kingdom did very well. He got 7th in kill points. Let's see. Minhee got 22nd. Minhee, who brought her main account to us a couple KvKs ago, she had another great KvK. Uni was in 25th in KP. Let's see where Officer Algebra is. Let's see where Algebra is here. Yeah, those stats were before KL. Ultimately, we had like identical KP to the Chinese alliance, and we did like 90% of the rallies and garrisons. So you look at the stats, and we have the same KP as 1698, and you're like, okay, well, these two kingdoms were equal, but we literally did 90% of the rally leads and the garrison leads. And we did all the territory build planning, and we flagged much better in Kingsland. So the stats don't tell everything. Barney had a great KvK. Barney finished in 44th. Barney had a really, really good KvK. Had really effective open field when the conditions were correct for that. And then at other times when the conditions were correct for swarming, he did a lot of swarming. So Barney played great. Ben's 48th. Pika 53. So a lot of our Koreans played quite well here. Algebra here in 63rd. And Algebra also had like a very good ratio. One thing I did want to note, it was really interesting. So Uni's a very, very good player. And he tanks for it. Like, he's a very strong account, but he also plays very aggressively in the open field, and he really makes it a point of like being at the front of our ball and essentially being inside of the enemy and like distracting the enemy. So Uni, for as good of a player as he is, and as good of a control of his marches that he has, his ratio is not very good in this KvK. He has 420 million KP, and then on healing, he's got 393. So his ratio is 420 to 393. in terms of kills to heal. I think this is again where stats can be a little bit misleading because I think the way he plays is really, really good for our kingdom. We need tanks. I do my best to tank. I don't go into the enemy, but I do try to stay right at the front of the ball as much as I can. And then I also try to individually retreat marches so that some marches get pulled into us. But Uni was 420 to 393. I'm pretty sure Algebra had like a better ratio because I remember looking at this the other night. Yeah, Algebra's at 236. And then on healing, if I'm not wrong, he was at like 170. Let me look here. Maybe he's not even on this list. Algebra, are you in the top 10 of healing? I don't think he is. Yeah, I think Algebra's outside the top 100 in healing. So you can see that Algebra's ratio is was very good this KvK. Very, very good. And Algebra is definitely a beast. I mean, we just played like a very clean KvK, right? It was effective. We didn't take a ton. We didn't take a lot of deads on our mains. I think the other KDs that had like similar KP to us, I think they took a lot more deads on their mains than we did. So we just had like a very clean KvK, and you know, we were just kind of theory crafting for the future and figuring out what to do next, and then we got the news that Addy was going to retire, so it kind of threw like a very smooth voyage into like a lot of turbulence. So, but you know, it was cool, man. It was cool to. It's cool when you're in the midst of like everything being good, you know, like there was just a moment like last Saturday, I think KvK was last Friday or last Saturday, I forget which one, but basically everything was going good, right? Like my business was going good, crypto was like at all-time highs. We had just won KvK. I had exactly 4 beers in my fridge, so I wasn't going to get too drunk. And it was just like perfect. And like I was hanging out in voice talking to, you know, some of my best friends that I have, right? It was great. And then, you know, things just changed a little bit, right? Things changed pretty quickly. And yeah, you know, like I like to talk about my ups and downs because I know that other people have ups and downs as well. And we're all just sort of dealing with a pretty turbulent world. And so, and ROK is turbulent as well, right? So, you know, you have to appreciate the good times when you have them. And, you know, having a good live stream here is certainly enjoyable. Having 24 of you watching is great. I know there's some other better action going on, so I really appreciate everybody hanging out. Be sure to throw a like on the stream. That will get some more people in here. We are going to move on now from 1770s trials and tribulations. There are a couple things I want to cover. There's a bit of drama in ROK that I want to talk about. And then we are going to check in on that really big KvK. We will do some commentary of the 2489 1960 KvK. I have watched it a bit, but not a ton, so I will be updating you all on it as I update myself. But first, let's talk a little bit about something that happened in ROK this week. In a couple of other YouTuber kingdoms, something happened in the KvK with Big Kane's Kingdom 1981 and Omniarch's Kingdom 1568. The reason I want to talk about this is because I think it was pretty interesting what happened. I think, you know, it's worth discussing just because it's an intellectually interesting thing. I'm going to criticize both YouTubers a tiny bit, but really not a lot. I don't know. I like criticizing as a way to sort of access truth. But, you know, I don't think either Kane or Omniarch behaved badly in this situation. I just think it's an interesting one. This is essentially what happened. Fire Camp, which is Kane's kingdom camp, and Wind Camp, which is Omniarch's camp, they were allies in this KvK. Fire Camp went into Sakaka and beat this kingdom up here, this camp, Earth Camp up here. They fought in this zone for about 5 days. I'm not sure who owns this area now. Okay, so Fire owns everything now, but there was a long stretch of time where Earth Camp had a fort here in Sakaka, and they fought for a number of days where, like, clearly Fire had won the zone, but Fire was unable to push Earth out of the zone. And so they kept fighting. That generated kill points, that generated deads. As that was happening, Omniarch's camp pulled a bit of an upset win in Wei Ji against 1606. 1606 is a extremely strong kingdom that did perform well in this KvK, but they did mostly lose Wei Ji, although they did have forts around at the time. At the time, they had forts around this sanctuary, where I don't think that Omniarch's camp pushed them out of those forts immediately. They might have done it later in the KvK when they had a bigger rally size. But, this was a pretty impressive win for Wind in this zone. At the same token, Kane's kingdom did get the job done in their zone 6 as well. The level 7 passes happened, blah, blah, blah. I don't think this was too significant. They went into Kingsland, and this was a very contentious Kingsland fight. I think you can watch a lot of the coverage on Big Kane's channel. 1606 came in from the bottom. Their allies were up here on the top. Their allies started getting pushed out, but 1606 was still in the zone, and the Zig was actually under contest. It was contested like 3 or 4 days into the zone. 1606 was still touching the Zig, and so they were able to contest the Zig. There was a very big open field fight around the Zig when it first opened. Ultimately, 1606 lost. They were pushed out. Kane's camp and Omniarch's camp won the KvK, captured Kingsland. The issue came in deciding who would get the star in this KvK. And I watched a lot of Kane's stream about this. I also watched Omniarch's video about this. I think I understand the arguments pretty well. Kane's argument is that their camp did the most kill points, and that statistically they contributed the most, and therefore they should get the star. I don't know if either content creator showed any conversation from before the KvK started that cemented whether it would be purely based on stats. I think in our KvK, we did just say, okay, this is going to be purely based on stats. The end, right? I don't know if that happened in this KvK or not. I think that's pretty important. And I think if it had happened, I feel like Kane might have emphasized that more in his live stream. I didn't watch Kane's video about this, but in his live stream, he didn't say anything about a pre-war agreement that it would be purely based on stats. Let me go ahead and show you the stats, because I think this is where it gets interesting, right? I think this is where it gets interesting. These are the statistics of this KvK. Let me see if you guys can see this pretty well. Looks like you guys can see this well. Okay. So here's what we see here from these stats, right? So Water Camp is 1606. You see they have the most kill points, but not the most deads, right? And you see that essentially Fire has more kill points than their ally Wind. And Fire and Earth, they both have way more deads than 1606 and Omniarch's camp, right? So from Kane's point of view, they have more deads and they have more kill points. Therefore, they deserve the star, right? And he said a lot about like how you should not be subjective in determining these things, because when you become subjective, it gets very messy. And the reason I'm talking about this whole issue is because I don't think that's true. I don't agree that you should not be subjective in these discussions, right? You can choose to be completely objective, and I think in this KvK, we did probably choose ahead of time to be completely objective. But I think there's a reason for subjectivity to exist in these discussions, and I think this KvK is a very good example of why subjectivity should exist. Because when I look at these stats, what I see is that Wind Camp, they did fight the tougher opponent in 1606. Now, in Kingsland, it became a little bit different. Obviously, both kingdoms fought 1606 in Kingsland, but Wind fought them in the original zone, and Wind I think also Wind also did more kill points in KL, right? Like one of Omniarch's arguments was we did more KP in Kingsland, and so therefore we deserve the star because of that. And I think there's some truth to that here, where like they took a lot less deads than Fire. Like they took 200 million less deads over the course of this KvK. They did get less KP, but not by a big ratio. The deads ratio is very high. And so at the end of the day, Wind was much more fresh when this KvK was over. If the KvK had been more difficult, if the KvK had gone on longer, then Wind would have been in a position to do more and more of the work to win the KvK for their side. And the main reason that Fire has more KP is because they spent, several days continuing to fight in Sakaka and trying to push out, like trying to burn down forts of Earth Camp. They generated a lot of deads and they generated KP from doing that. Kane said on his stream that the trades were good in Sakaka, but if the trades were good, that begs the question, why did they stop? Like ultimately they did stop. They let Earth keep territory in this zone because they felt it was not worth it. They felt at some point the trades were not worth it to keep going. So, I mean, I'm sure the trades were decent, and so yes, you are wearing down the enemy. There is definitely an objective being accomplished by staying in this zone to earn KP, or to like whittle down the enemy, wear down the enemy. There's value to that, but I mean, a kingdom can do that in a shady way too. Like, I'm not saying that Fire did anything shady, and like for the way that Kane reacted to this whole betrayal, or like, so yeah, the part that I missed is that essentially they could not agree on the Zig, and so like Wind like supposedly proposed that Fire get the Zig and then changed their mind, and they couldn't agree on the Zig. Ultimately, Fire let 1606 back into Kingsland. Wind was completely pushed out, and 1606 is actually now winning the KvK, and they got the final Zig. Like, I don't think that Fire Camp did anything shady to like artificially inflate their KP. But if they did do something shady to artificially inflate their KP, it wouldn't look any different than what they did, right? It would look the same. And kingdoms are going to do that, and kingdoms have done that and will continue to do that in Rise of Kingdoms. They will artificially inflate their KP. I mean, you see KvKs all the time. The KvK that we're about to go and watch, I would predict that there's a decent chance we go into that KvK and we see two really big balls fighting each other in the field and not attacking each other's flags at all. Because when I watched streams yesterday, I think that's what I saw. I think I saw two balls fighting in the field, nobody burning each other. And there are kingdoms in this game who are going to do that. And then they're going to go, well, we have the most KP. Like, they're going to ignore the fact that they did a bunch of pointless fighting, and they're going to say, we have to be objective about this. We have the most KP. We deserve the star. And I'm going to tell you, as an objective-based kingdom, we have seen that happen before, and it feels very bad to give the star to a camp like that. It feels very bad to give a star to a camp who contributed less to the victory, but happened to have better stats. And then they're just like, well, we have to be objective about this, so that's what we're going to do. I'm not saying being completely objective is wrong. It's cleaner. It's cleaner to be completely objective. But like, how can you be completely objective if like the competition level is way different in one zone or another? In this KvK, they both ended up fighting 1606. But in many KvKs, one team might have a very tough opponent. The other team might have an easier opponent. If the team with the easier opponent ends up having more stats, then do you give the star to the kingdom that has the better stats? To me, that's crazy, right? You have to give it to the kingdom that had the much tougher fight. Ultimately, you have to give ultimately the star should go to the kingdom that had the tougher fight did more for the win, and played better. And so that's why I just think this is an interesting KvK to look at, because I do kind of see both arguments. I really can. I can see both arguments here, and I can understand why it became very contentious. Barney, what's going on? Keaton says 1981 didn't contribute less. I don't think 1981 contributed less, but I don't think that Windcamp contributed less either. Like I don't think, I mean, I think when you look at these stats, I think it's like very, very close. I think it's very, very close here, right? Where like Wind fought the tougher opponent, they did more in Kingsland, and they were better set up if this became a super, super tough KvK where Kingsland went on and on and on and on. So, I mean, I think it's really close, Keaton. I think this one's very, very close. I can understand why this was a contested, why this was in dispute. I really do. And I think a lot of this comes down to communication, right? Like you have to set these ground rules ahead of time. Gozu says Big Kane 1824, Omniarch KD 1770. I think that's a pretty good comparison. I mean, as I'm talking about this, I'm not like 0% thinking about the 2268 KvK, where I still sort of feel like we had a really good argument for the star, but ultimately 1824 had better stats. Keaton says that the 1568 camp was plus 2 trillion KP, had a lot more KP than 1981. Yeah, I mean, one of the arguments that Big Kane made was that they're the smaller camp. You know, so like they sort of maybe, and he could like legitimately argue that they played better, you know, by being this effective as the smaller camp. But plus 2 trillion KP, Keaton, are you sure? That's a lot. I mean, I guess I believe you, but having 2 trillion more KP than another camp is quite a lot. I don't know if that's correct. Yeah, I mean they were smaller though. I forget where I was, but yeah, I think you have to communicate about this ahead of time, right? You have to be clear if you have to be clear ahead of time if it's going to be purely objective based or if there will be some sort of subjective aspect. I know before the war starts, it's very hard to say like, let's implement subjective elements later. I think a good example of like the communication issues here are with like a statement that happened several days earlier. This was Omniarch's video about this. This is something that the leader of 1568 said roughly 10 days before the dispute occurred. He said, had our discussion and our proposal is this. We take Zig at next opening and hold until final opening for honor gains. Gives a little added reward to us, which our members would appreciate. Wind gets all the ally autarchs still. That is the key sentence here. Wind gets all the ally autarchs still. Blah, 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 blah for the rest of it, right? Now, it is true that this statement here implies that 1568 is agreeing to give the Zig to Fire Camp, right? And I think the premise of Kane saying that this was a betrayal is this message where 1568 implies that they will give the star to Fire Camp. Now, to me, what is missing here is a further conversation where they solidify this deal, right? There's, you know, I'm a gambler, right? I was a professional gambler for many years. If you're gonna make a deal, if you're gonna book a bet in gambling, both people have to say booked. You don't just say let's do this bet, and then the other person says sounds good. No, you say booked. You make it very, very clear that a deal is in place. So that then if you have to go back later, if there's some sort of arbitration that has to happen, that conversation is there where you say booked. And I think in Rise of Kingdom diplomacy, this message here is not the end of a negotiation. Like this to me simply does not indicate the end of a negotiation. There has to be a conversation where this is like agreed, you know, people on both sides are saying agreed. We agree to this. Lore is in the chat now. Lore from 1606 here saying subjective is so messy. The real issue is that after a few days of discussion after Zig, it appeared to be resolved, and then talks came back up and broke off shortly before last open. But 3 biggish KDs in each camp is also a lot of opinions. He says, Lore says that was the deal that was agreed to. I mean, someone should show the conversation where like people are saying that the deal is agreed to, in my opinion, right? Like, I feel like that's pretty important. I will say, to throw a little bit of criticism Omniarch's way, I watched this video of Omniarch, and he, at this point in the video, what Omniarch says is, there's nothing in this statement that says star. You know, he sort of made a big point of it. It's like, where's star? I'm looking for the word star. There's nothing in this statement that says the word star. And Omniarch is attempting to insult our intelligence at that point, right? Because when you say wind gets all the ally autarchs still, that is implying that fire gets the star. That is very clearly implying that fire gets the star. The fact that the word star is not in this statement means nothing. That doesn't mean anything. It might mean something for someone making a YouTube video and trying to convince the lowest common denominator that this was not a, proposal to give their allies the star. But like anyone with a brain who plays this game and is experienced in this game can look at this statement and realize that this is implying that a person gets the star, that the other camp is getting the star. So like, I just get really upset when someone insults my intelligence, right? Like, don't piss on my head and tell me that it's raining. It's just not a chill thing to do, right? It's Omniarch said he's a chill guy, but this is not a chill thing to do. It's not a chill thing to just say something and really make it a strongly stated argument that literally falls apart with just the tiniest bit of reading comprehension here. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the whole situation. Lore is giving some good, interesting context here that the deal was agreed to. I would agree that it is messy by Windcamp. I mean, I would agree that it is messy. Yeah, I mean, this is messy. This is messy. To have this deal on the 4th, and then you wonder what happened after this. Like, you wonder how the conversation went. But regardless of the exact specifics of this conversation, for there then to be a dispute on December 14th or so, it's not a good look. I mean, especially if Lore's saying that there was a deal in place. I mean, it's not a good look for Wind at that point, right? I can understand why Wind took issue with giving the star to fire. I do understand that. But yeah, I mean, I think you ultimately have to like communicate better, and but it's really tough. It's really tough. I mean, I've been in a situation like this before. I mean, we have been literally screwed out of a star before, where we had like a 10-day long debate about whether who was going to get the star, and we were completely worn out. Our allies were fresh. And listen, they made intellectually dishonest arguments for days and days and days. And, ultimately, people play to their own incentives. They just do. People simply play to their own incentives. And sometimes it just gets messy. And I think it especially gets messy when there's like a semi-legitimate argument for both teams, right? And I think that's what happened in this situation. I think a lot of it played out as it should, where like you absolutely do have to make these things public. When we got screwed out of our star a couple years ago, I didn't make it public. I just I'm kind of a lazy dude, and I don't always make a lot of YouTube videos. I'd planned to make a bunch of YouTube videos about it, but I just didn't get around to it. And then time just passed and it was too late. I do think you have to call these situations out. I think that having a YouTube channel, one of the really good things about having a YouTube channel is that it gives you a bit of protection against getting screwed over, because like the people screwing you over know that they're going to get some heat online for it. Jürgen just says 100% Brian. I thought that was dodgy AF by Omni. Yeah, I mean, I was just like, come on, man. Come on, man. That's not what a chill guy does. That's not what a chill guy does. I think a chill guy just is like as straight up as possible, you know? Eli, welcome to the stream. Listen, man, I'm not that smart. I'm just a chill guy as well. You know, I'm just a chill guy as well. But Barney wants to play with my incentives. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing played out pretty like. I mean, it played out pretty clean, I guess, is what I would say. Like, I hadn't thought about this before, but if one of the camps is more wrong, I would say it probably was Wind Camp that was more in the wrong. I think that's pretty safe to say. I think that Wind Camp was more in the wrong on that one, and ultimately they got called out and they got kicked out of Kingsland. You know, like they also got kicked out of Kingsland. So I think it played out pretty well, and it was one of the better wars of the year for sure. And yeah, it was just interesting. Like I said, I don't really have like too much fault for anybody, at least not the public facing people. But I thought it was interesting, right? Because man, I don't know. I mean, Laura's saying subjective is so messy. It is messy, but like, I mean, look, here's the problem. The problem is that there are some kingdoms in this game that can be reasonable, right? And like this is one of the legacies that Addy is going to leave behind as a leader, is that he was a reasonable person, right? Like if we were in a KvK where we had 10%, where when it started, we said, let's just base this on stats. And then at the end, we had 10% more KP than our allies. But our allies fought a much tougher opponent and like had to go through more stuff in the KvK than we did. And they sort of like helped us in Kingsland more than we helped them. There's a world where our kingdom would have said, okay, you guys genuinely deserve the star more than we do, so you get the star. And so like, I think Laura's right that subjective is very messy, but like it is possible in the world to be a reasonable person. It is possible to be a reasonable team or a reasonable institution and factor in more things than just raw numbers, right? The issue in Rise of Kingdoms in 2024, and we're about to get into 2025, the issue that we have now is that we have this is a worldwide game, and there are very powerful kingdoms from many different countries, from many different cultures. And I think there are probably some cultural differences in how we deal with these things. I think I think we just have different backgrounds, right? Like different countries and different continents have literal different backgrounds. We have different religious backgrounds. We have different political backgrounds. We have different governments today. We have different, we read different books when we're in school. We just have differences in the way we view the world. I think that may be part of why we have to be objective. I think the other reason we have to be objective is that at the end of the day, like if you're from a different country, if your kingdom is from like Vietnam or China or Korea, then you are part of totally different communities in this game than we're a part of. Like, why am I talking about this issue, right? Why am I talking about like Omniarch's camp and Kane's camp? Well, a big reason I'm talking about it is because they made English-speaking videos about these camps, and it was literally two English-speaking groups that had this dispute, right? So like for us, for this community, for the people watching my stream, for the people watching Kane's stream, they're involved in those communities. And so we hear about those things. But if it was a Vietnamese kingdom that was screwing Kane over, guess what would happen? The coverage of that whole incident would be totally different on Vietnamese YouTube And very few people from Vietnam would watch Kane's video about it because they don't speak English, right? They're not able to understand what Kane is saying. And even if they speak some English, it's kind of annoying to like hear someone speaking a different language making a complicated argument, right? So like what happens in this game is like all you have to do is convince your own community that you're fine. All you have to do is convince your own community that you've done nothing wrong. And then nothing's really going to happen to you. Like you're not going to be affected by other communities, right? You know, when kingdoms from a certain country rig KvKs in their favor, people who speak other languages might complain about it, but people who speak their language are all fine with it, and they don't hear that criticism. And I think that's the reality of where we are, is that we have all these different cultures, and we interact on the battlefield as two cultures are interacting now, here with 489, which is primarily Vietnamese, but also international, against a Chinese-led international kingdom here in 60 GT. We see now these two balls are undecided about whether they fight or not. It looked like 60 GT was walking away, and the smaller 489 ball was trying to engage. 60 GT was like, "What are you doing, sir? We have more than you." And 489 is quickly falling back. But yeah, I mean, we just have so many different cultures, and like again, from an incentives perspective, there's not a lot of deterrent to behaving in a slightly shady way, because ultimately, while other cultures might complain about it, your own culture might be completely fine. And I think that's what's happening. I don't really think that like one country is shadier than another or anything like that. I literally just think incentive-wise, we are split up enough that people just know they can get away with it. Like they just know they can get away with it, right? If 770 were to screw over a Vietnamese kingdom, who's going to hear about it? Who's going to hear about it? Vietnamese players are going to hear about it, and they might be, you know, against us in the future. But like none of our recruits are going to hear about it. None of our own players are going to hear about it. And none of our most likely allies in the future are going to hear about it. So I think in that sense, we are in a pretty cutthroat place right now. And, you know, and so like maybe you do have to make it all objective. I don't know. I mean, maybe you do have to make it all objective. Irgun just says, shout out to the 1079 King. Last KvK gave our KD the star, even though in the end their DKP was higher. Yeah, I mean, I know Kane. Kane's a very cool dude. So yeah, I didn't realize Kane did that, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the, like, I do think Addy would have done that as well, and I think in the future that's something that we would still be open to in 770. I mean, yeah, I mean, like, at the end of the day, you know, if you're like a kingdom that's been around for a long time and you have a leader who's been around for a long time, you're not like that nervous about like not getting the star. I don't think the star matters a whole lot. Really, I think the autarchs matter certainly, but yeah, I mean, every kingdom has the freedom to choose the level of integrity they operate at, right? Like, just because everybody else is being kind of shady doesn't mean you have to be. Like, definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, A, it's a game, and B, like, when you do shady stuff in your life, you do tend to remember it later. I'm not gonna lie. The worst things you do in life, they tend to stick with you. So that's a pretty good deterrent in and of itself to not do bad stuff. Lore says ROK is a pretty small community, especially Diplo-wise, matchmaking pool-wise. Yeah, I mean, Lore, you're at a slightly higher level than we are, so like it's smaller where you are. I don't know. I have never been in a situation where we have been able to get revenge on someone who has screwed us over. Like, we have never been in that position. A kingdom that we feel like has treated us unfairly, we have never been able to do anything to affect them negatively. So it is small, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, what kingdoms have seen any ramifications? What kingdoms have seen any ramifications for the shady stuff they do? I haven't seen too many. Kelton says he's stupid that his players didn't like that for sure. Well, I'm sure that Kane didn't make the decision in a vacuum. I'm sure he discussed it with other people on his leadership team. Um, if like kings don't make decisions unilaterally against the wishes of everyone in their kingdom. They at least have to have the people around them in support of it. And more than likely, they also have people in like the normal player pool who are supportive of it. I can see people getting upset about it, but I mean, listen, like I don't think you should ever like criticize someone for acting with integrity, right? Because if you act with integrity, you are costing yourself plenty, like in life in general. And there is like a very big tendency to like sort of flatten things down and be like, well, let's not really think about integrity and ethics too much. Let's just sort of accept the fact that it's a dog eat dog world, and let's just sort of go from there. That is less messy. Like I agree, it's less messy to be like, well, everything is dog eat dog, so I'm going to be the exact same way. And you probably will get ahead acting that way. But that doesn't, eliminate the fact that there are like, at the end of the day, like if a kingdom deserves the star, then they deserve the star. And deserving the star is subjective and objective at the same time. Like there will always be room for debate about who deserves the star. But like sometimes it's pretty clear. And it's like if you fought the much tougher KvK, if you were more of the reason why your side won, then like you probably do deserve the star. Does that mean that you're always going to get the star? No, it doesn't mean you're always going to get the star. But truth does exist. As a former high school classmate of mine who wrote a show called The Dropout wrote in one of her episodes of that show, truth does exist. I don't know if I can find that on YouTube, but let me look real quick. I don't think I could find this, but anyway. I don't think my moral high ground rants are very appealing to people, so I'm gonna try to end it right here. Irgundu says it was a fair decision. We had higher DKP when we locked 2217 out of KL. Oh, so that's the KvK that just ended. I thought you meant the KD before this, but Irgundu is actually talking about like the literal KP or the little Lost Kingdom that just ended with 1079 and 2217. Laura says, speaking of the other KvK on screen, 2489 is doing pretty well, but lack in numbers is going to hurt them long term. I have not been watching this KvK much at all. So let me get a bit of a lay of the land here. I mean, one thing I definitely noticed was that at the start, 89 was a bit more defensive, just in terms of like they put their forts up faster, right? They put their forts up faster than 60 GT did, but ultimately both teams have put a lot of forts around this Castrum Victoris, which does give 3% all damage, by the way. This is a heck of an important holy site for the opening zone being contested. Is there any way to progress elsewhere? Doesn't look like it. I mean, they could do like a hardcore flank. I mean, 60 GT could do like a very hardcore flank over here and see what happens. I mean, obviously, maybe this fort wall is fully intact. I mean, I guess it is. I want to take a screenshot of this, actually. I'm going to take a screenshot of this because this is this can't be. No, obviously they can. Obviously they could flag around here. Obviously 60 GT can flag all the way over here, if they wanted to flank. But it sounds like 60 GT is just happy to sit here and fight in the open field. Yeah, it doesn't look like any of these forts have been touched, right? Doesn't really look like any of these forts have been touched. A little bit laggy here. Let me... what about this fort? Yeah. Looks like they're... I guess what's being set up here is a quite intense open field fight over this holy site. Actually, I guess 60 GT... Okay. 60 GT does have the holy site surrounded, right? Okay. So they have the... I thought maybe that wasn't the case yesterday. I think yesterday when I was watching, there was like a flag here, but clearly 60 GT was able to put a fort down at this spot. And so they do fully have this... They have this holy site fully under control. And yeah, if we look at the numbers here, at least at this hour, it does seem quite good for GT. I haven't really seen too many spots where GT didn't have the advantage. Lore says, no reason to do anything but field fight. Sure, but if you're 49, you do wonder what the trade is. I mean, you wonder what the, like, just what we're watching right at this moment, right? Like, they literally got pushed off the field, right? They got pushed off the field. Everyone's running away. You have to imagine the trades are good for GT here. How bad do the trades have to be for 49 before you say, let's retreat and fight another day? We can get a bit more of the story by looking at 60 GT's allies down here in 188 and 1316. Actually, before we do that, let's just look at this. Let's look at the stats here as far as deaths and severely woundeds. We've got 731 combatants, which is not that many. This is about what we had in ours, actually. And then 7.2 billion down here. Let's look at the data here. A little bit less, actually. A little bit less fighting up here. Fewer combatants. Really interesting how few... Now, obviously, it's only 2 kingdoms up here. It's 4 kingdoms down below. But 542 combatants. If we were in like a seed KvK in a zone like this, I bet we would see more combatants than this. Which is just interesting. I mean, obviously, these are just like top-heavy players, but interesting. Down here, you can see that 1316 has the top 5 spots in kill points. And actually, only one player from the 1846 side is in the top 10 here. And what do we see here right now? We see flags burning for, I believe this is Kingdom 6. Yeah, this is going to be Kingdom 1262 here. You see Makote is postured up near this burning flag, but another flag burning here. So it does look like East Anglia is making progress. Here's Gaines Gaming on the front lines. I believe I'm competing with Gaines Gaming for YouTube audience at the moment. He does have the inherent advantage of having a front row seat to the fight that I am watching. And Gaines is out in the field here. So I will, I will acknowledge that Gaines is I believe live streaming right now. And he's in this KvK. But I'm giving top level commentary here. I'm giving like the third party Osiris League official caster point of view here of this very big war. I mean, it's early. It's early in the war, but you know, sometimes the writing is on the wall very early in these wars. To some extent, I would say the writing is on the wall in this one, where GT side is literally winning both zones at this point. They are winning both friggin' zones. Now, they're not pushing on 1846, which has the top side of the burr. They're not pushing on 1846. They're just sort of, you know, it's just a dead front over here. As we start to get into Korean uptime, the 188 side is a Korean camp. Both kingdoms are Korean, so they're starting to get into their uptime. Not sure where 1262 is from, but I'm guessing they're probably like EU North American type of KD. They do have 4 stars, but this is quite a test for 1262 to be thrown into this KvK here. And it does look like this front over here is being breached at this point. There's not a ton left to fight for in this zone if you lose that first. Well, actually, that's not true. What 1846 can do is they can try to defend this holy site here for as long as they can. It does give 10% march speed. Doesn't make a, you know, it's nice. 10% march speed is very nice for the open field. But, you know, as we go into day 2 of this war, we're going into Korean uptime. I think it is safe to assume that 1262 is going to get pushed back over here. I assume there's a fort being built here. No, it's just a flag. You wonder if they can cut this off. This map does seem to have a lot of choke points, doesn't it? Obviously, you would have to put a fort somewhere in here. Or maybe put a resource center here. And then I would imagine you can put a fort right here to block this choke point, right? I think a fort right here where this crystal tile is does make a lot of sense to slow down this advance. I think now would be the time to put that fort up, in all honesty. And then maybe you block everything, but I guess you can still come around over here. I mean, I would imagine a fort wall can get placed here. I would imagine there's a world where you can block all this off and force the enemy to get through forts. That's the more high level play here. Is make this a slow burn, make this a slow defeat, and make the enemy rally into your forts in order to win this zone. I mean, I think now is the time to make those plays if you're ouch with the guidance of 1846. We'll see if they get it done. They do have a little bit of time, obviously, but they are getting pushed back here. They can backflag. They have time. They can backflag for quite a while. You know, this is when it gets rough. You know, night number 2 of the war, you're going into your downtime. The enemy is well into their uptime. Pretty sizable ball here for East Anglia. These are the balls that you love to be a part of and you hate to be against. And yeah, the 1846 side is starting to feel it right now. And you don't really turn this around by like rallying people to get online because number one, you have a lot of farms here at the front line. It looks to me like you have a lot of farms, although it seems to be mainly one player. Looks like you've got Lucci 3 here as a farm, but not too many others. B10 Baby here, another farm. So they're set up fairly well here, but it's going to be a long night. It's going to be a long night, and you just... This is where you miss somebody like Addy, right? Like this is, I'm just watching somebody else's KvK and I'm missing Addy already because Addy can just, quietly, like the rest of us will be fighting and Addy will just quietly be assessing this situation and he'll just put down the perfect forts. He'll put down forts in all the right places. He'll put down resource centers in all the right places. And he will optimize our ability to do damage to the enemy with building. And it's definitely a very big deal. And, I hope I've explained to people how in this situation, like being a really good builder is a super big deal because I do think looking at this, that the difference between being a good builder and a bad builder is the difference between getting flanked in 12 hours and getting flanked in 2+ days. I literally think building forts in the right place is that difference here. So yeah, Ouch has got to get on that for sure. But let's go over here to where it's a little bit more of a fair fight. We are watching GT in the field. Let's look at the top 10. Let's look at the top 10 killers here as well. Al Haytham in first. Haven't heard of him before. One big in second. Genie in fourth. Shout out to Genie, who has visited the chat before. Jack in fifth. I always wonder if Jack is Captain Jack, the former king of 2100. It probably is, but I don't know. Arvix in sixth. Prodigo in seventh. Osno in eighth. Warthog in ninth. So we actually played against Warthog when Warthog was in 1818. I don't know if this is a different account or the same account, but yeah, we have played against two of these players before. Obviously, we've played against Arvix many times, and we did play against Warthog quite a bit when we beat 1818. Looks like a heat map. Looks like they got a heat map now. Look at the heat map. It was expanding earlier. There it is. The heat map showing where all the fighting has taken place. A little bit of fighting down here, which we are seeing. Bit of a side fight here near Arvix's city. Volcano down here. Some big players here. Well, Volcano's not that big, to be honest. I actually have better stats than Volcano. But Mester King here. 13 billion KP. Solemn Q8, 16 billion KP. I mean, it's just such heavy hitters in this Kingsland. I was watching Plato's stream early on in the day, and he was not in the top 100. I don't know if Plato eventually got into the top 100 or not, but I mean, in the KvK we had against 2268, Plato was like a top 10 autarch person, when zones would open. And then yesterday, he was not cracking the top 10 in this KvK. It just goes to show how big these players are, how powerful their accounts are. It looks like a normal KvK. Yeah, it looks like a pretty normal KvK, but it's just like everyone is so strong that like if you're not this strong, you just get demolished, and you're just probably at this point 2 days into the war, you're just no longer out there. You're like, I can't absorb these trades. I can't engage in pointless field fighting if I'm going to get bad trades. I do think it's interesting that they're pretty dancy. Like from what I've seen, everybody's been pretty dancy. I think it's pretty interesting actually, right? Like GT, we can see from GT's marches here that they're not going into the 489 ball at all. There's no one going into the 489 ball. Are we going to see anything differently if we go into dot mode? Not really. I mean, look at how... Boy, in the KvKs I fight in, you see more people getting pulled in for sure. I wonder if a lot of people are only using 3 marches. What I would do in a KvK like this, if I found myself in this war, what I would do is I would have bought Mountain Warfare for sure. I would have grinded Bastion quests as best I could. I would have focused as much on open field Crystal Tech as I could, because obviously I would not be garrisoning at this level. But what I would do is I would run 3 marches. I would run my best 3 marches. And what happens when you run 3 marches is that none of them swing forward. When you use more than 4 marches, one of those marches is going to swing forward into the enemy. That's what I was looking for in that fight. I was looking for somebody to swing forward from either team. It literally did not happen when we were watching, which is freaking crazy. I don't know how that doesn't happen. You see here, for example, this Zug from Glock is sort of swinging forward. The rest of Glock's marches are a little bit better positioned. The Zug is way out of position. That is normally what happens. Let's try to look for that in the next fight. Let's see if we can see some people getting caught out of position. Because at the tail end of that fight, I mean, literally, here's Andy with the Jon Snow avatar. I've seen this player quite a bit. A lot of stats on the Andy Jon Snow here. 2489 trying to push back out. I feel like it's about time for 60 GT to turn on him here. Lols, I will show that in a moment. Yep. Yeah, Laura confirming the Jack Jack is from 10. I think Jack Jack. So there was a person named Captain Jack in 2100, and then 2100 I think kind of fell apart, and Jack left. I assumed that was the Jack Jack in 1093, but I never knew that for sure. I assumed it was the same person who went from 2100 to 1093, and maybe now they're in 1960, but I don't know that for sure. Let's see. Oh, so Lore's giving a bunch of info. I need to get caught up on chat right now. Lore says 151 accounts in GT, 50 million KP this KvK, 127 in 2489. Yeah, 151 to 127. I mean, I don't know how much migration out of 2489 there was. Obviously, I heard that Forza migrated out of 2489. I mean, if Forza migrated out, then I would imagine some other people might have migrated out as well. I mean, I heard rumors on Facebook that Pho was stepping back, but let's see if Pho's anywhere to be found here. Not in R4, I don't think. Yeah, not sure what the status of Pho is in Rise of Kingdoms at this point. If Pho does fully depart from the game, that's like huge to the game. Like Pho's impact on this game is massive, and it's not just as the leader of 2489. Obviously, he does other things. But yeah, that's a pretty big disadvantage for 2489 if they have 24 fewer main accounts in this fight than GT does. And GT generated 50 million KP in one day. That's amazing. We only generated about 35 million KP in our entire KvK. So they actually generated more in one day than we generated in our whole war, if I have that right, which I imagine I do. Are You Lol says, yeah, Fuss sold his account. He sold his main account and kept a smaller one. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to sell your main account, then you're probably going to be way less involved. It's partly the account strength that Pho had, but it's also just the leadership that he had. He had his hand in a lot of kingdoms, and clearly was one of the driving forces of 2489. When you lose that driving force, it's a very big deal. I don't think I'm overstating it to say that if Pho is retiring, then the two biggest leadership retirements of the year would be Adinavo from My Kingdom 770 and Pho from 2489, and then obviously the leader of 2429 also retired. I can't remember if Leopard retired this year or last year. Obviously, Leopard came back for this KvK. And if I were going to be winning in this comfortable of a way against my arch nemesis, I would probably come back too. So pretty sharp A sharp comeback decision by Leopard to have fun with the boys as they absolutely push back 2489 and just have some happy go fun time in the open field. I mean, it doesn't get any more enjoyable than this, does it? There's Redline. Redline's still active as well. Redline knows how to find a good party, that's for sure. Prodigo calling the retreat here for GT. Let's take a look at the officer crew for GT. This player, number one, obviously the Chinese names we're not able to identify. Seawill here. Star is someone who I remember from, I believe I remember Star from the Osiris League. Uchi's a name that is very familiar. Piltong here. Piltong with the very beastly account. So many arc wins on some of these teams. Let's see how many arc wins Seawill has. 88. Yeah, they've got a lot more arc games under their belt than the rest of us have at this point. Al Haitham. Definitely a Mid-East aspect to GT for sure at this point. Ahmad Aziz has accounts here. An incredible rebuild job by 60GT after their leader left. I mean, just a incredible job of keeping this thing going. A lot of credit to Seawill and the whole leadership team here to just bring GT back to prominence when their leader left. That's really impressive to accomplish. Oh, Ingrid just says Forza is still in 89. He's migrating after the KvK. Gotcha. Alloys, welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. Congratulations on your high scoring finish in the 1029 KvK Allies. I was watching one of Lambo's streams about recapping your KvK, and I saw that you scored very, very highly in your first KvK in 1029. And it sounds like you guys had a big fight. I believe Mools might be playing a pretty important role in GT these days as well. Just a lot of big names here, but also a lot of names that I don't recognize. You know, they get rid of the dead weight and bring in the top talent. Plato, obviously here, very talented player. Amira, Addy and I had different assessments of Amira, who we played against in 1903. I said Amira was like leading an ARC team in the Grand Prix qualifiers, so obviously they must be pretty good. Addy said they were fighting pointless battles during Kingsland, and I was like, well, that's a good point too. So, you know, different things can work here in 60GT. Obviously, when you're doing days of open field fighting, some open field juggernaut is like super valuable, right? Like if someone only cares about the open field and like doesn't really care if it's objective based or not, they're super valuable over the last 48 hours because all these kingdoms have done is fight pointless battles in the open field. That is all they have done. And, you know, for me, like what's different about this war than the 1093 war against both of these kingdoms, right? Like the difference between the two wars is that the 1093 war was a question. Like, yes, 1093 was playing defense, but like it was like it just felt very intense, right? They were probably getting very good trades in those outposts that they were garrisoning and those forts that they were garrisoning. And the open field was contentious at times, and like the opening of the zone was like so intense, right? Like the opening of that Invictus zone between 1093 and these two kingdoms here, it was very intense. Some of the forts for both sides were under pressure at different times. If I'm remembering it correctly, there were times where 1093 had really big pressure on some of the most important 489 forts. And they had like rallies on those forts. So it was like very intense objective-based combat at times in that 1093, 960, 49 KvK. Look, I mean, it was a flawed war. It was a flawed war because of the map, and it was a flawed war because the two sides were probably not fair. But I still rate that war very, very highly this year, just because of how intense it was, what a high level it was played at, and the numbers that both teams were able to put out there at the zone opening, and at various points, like through those like 2 or 3 days, right? Like I remember those fights being intense basically the whole time, right? And it almost never felt this pointless because like things were getting rallied and troops were dying, right? Like that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, what's happening right now? You're wearing down huge whales who have unlimited resources and potentially have unlimited speed ups. I think the rubber meets the road when you start depleting the troops of these players. I mean, maybe a kingdom like 1489 can get worn out by speed ups first. Maybe. I don't know that we've ever really seen it. Like, have we seen a huge Imperium run out of speed ups and that's how they lose the war? I don't think so. So to me, the 1093 war just felt more intense. So it felt more intense in some sort of way. And then obviously 1093 did manage to hold on in Kingsland for days. Even though their allies quit, 1093 held on in Kingsland for quite a long time. I mean, are we going to see the same thing from 489 here? I hope we do. I hope we see an incredibly strong showing from 489, even if they're going to lose. But that remains to be seen, right? Like, I mean, 1093 has a lot of pride in what they do, and obviously 1093 is still very strong to this day. Part of the way you stay strong is you operate with pride and you sort of you acknowledge the fact that you will be just fine even if you lose certain wars. Like, okay, you're the underdog, you're at a big disadvantage in a war. You can still play super hard, you can give your players a ton of content. Leadership can demonstrate that they know what they're doing and can put their team in good positions to get good trades, to have success. You can do all those things even when you lose, and when you pull that off, then like people just stay and your kingdom continues. You know, this one's still very early, obviously, and you know the thing with this map, right, is that it's kind of a heroic anthem type of KvK. This is the King of All Britain map, and so ultimately, as Lore said, there's going to be a free zone where both teams can get. They can, you know, 489 can go into Gloucester here. They can get the 10%. They can get the 10% march speed holy site here, and they can get the 3% all damage here. Now, maybe they will have to share that with 1846, but they can get most of the buffs that the enemy has. They can also get these burrs, which they can also get the burrs in this zone, which you need to use your stratagem points. I'm not going to look around for the burrs because who cares? Just trust me, they're in these zones. And then once this zone is over, they're going to safely inhabit Warwick. I think it's Warwick. Yeah, it's Warwick. They'll safely inhabit Warwick, and then they will fight at these level. And then, 960 is going to go into Derby, and then at this level 7 pass, they are going to fight each other. And this will be like a pretty stable situation, right? Like, even if 1489 is on the back foot, they will be able to garrison their forts, potentially get good trades in their forts. They can potentially hold the pass and maybe get a good, maybe get a good trade in the pass. Obviously, 60 GT will probably be able to double rally. We'll see what happens, There's some very good pass garrisons. I mean, listen, I don't think I'm going to be giving anything away by saying that Eleanor Flavius is a great pass garrison, right? Single target damage on both Eleanor and Flavius. They're both susceptible to swarm, but in a pass you can't get swarmed. That single target damage does a lot. Eleanor Flav or Flav Eleanor is going to be like a very, very good pass garrison for whatever team holds that pass. But it remains to be seen how often 489 will be able to take that pass. But listen, in a war like this, where it looks like it's maybe a little bit unfair, level 7 passes are pretty cool because it gives both teams a chance to compete, right? It gives, 1489 can get the pass at certain points, then they can feel very good about taking the pass and maybe get some good value from holding the pass. And the King's Land is very small, so the King's Land could be a huge blowout potentially, but at least you have like a big zone here where they can fight for a long time, where forts are hard to rally, and then you're going to have a good fight at pass 7 as well. Are You Low says, does Arvik still have accounts in 1960? Yeah, he's R5 right now. Or wait, is it? No, never mind. I said that wrong. I'm not sure. I didn't see the Arviks. I didn't see Arviks in GT. I'll scroll through again, but I don't remember seeing Arviks here. That's a good question, Lols. I forgot about that. I forgot how involved in GT Arvix is. But obviously Arvix founded 2489, so he's going to focus on that kingdom in this KvK. The American pronunciations are killing me. What's up, Addy? Good to have you here. I consider this pointless field fighting. Lore says that it's a game and they're having fun. Fair enough. If you're losing, you've got limited resources and limited speeds. Arvix apparently went crazy in this KvK. I mean, obviously both teams are having their moments, and in the top 10, you had players from both kingdoms actually representing in the top 100s, or in the top 10. So, I mean, Genie's like 4th. I think Arvix was 6th. So, 49 is obviously having some success on the field. Looks like they had a bit of a win in the northwest corner of the burr here. But this lane here, this very scenic spot, I mean, listen, if you're going to have just pointless field fights, you might as well have a very, very scenic situation here. There's always something happening at this burr. There's a lot of life at these burrs. There are religious ceremonies that go on when the burrs are closed. And then they're freaking out when you raid them. So, yeah, really nice spot to be fighting here. No cities. The thing that's amazing about this spot is there's just no cities. So, if you get caught out of position, and there's no resource tiles either, or very few. So if you get caught out of position, you are in some deep, deep trouble. I'm amazed that we don't see more marches swinging forward into the enemy. I mean, we see it a bit, like this Cav march is swinging forward into the enemy. But like, look at GT. Like, look at how rarely a GT march gets pulled in. It's very interesting to me. I feel like I get pulled in way more than this. But does that mean that they're not being aggressive? I mean, yeah, a little bit. The Cav there gets pulled in, but maybe it's because they're against this. Maybe it's because they're against this structure. Yep. Okay. So Lore just said that. Yeah. They're fighting there because it acts like a mountain, so you don't go out of position. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So like if you hug a mountain, your marches tend to not swing forward. And you are seeing that a ton in this fight. So pretty much everyone is probably feeling like they're fighting very well. Ellis says 960 and 2377 are both too big strong. They are only going to be able to fight each other to get tough fights. No one else is close. I'd still love to see 2377 against 1093. I mean, maybe they're like way ahead and maybe there's just no way for 1093 to deal with Wild Lion and Mr. Hope, but I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it. I'll be right back. I need to get a little more water. Oh, did 1093 say no to 2377? That's interesting. I mean, if 1093 can dodge 960 and 2377, then they can get a good matchup against anybody else, right? Like, I think they could beat anyone else. You know, if it's true that 960 and 2377 are way stronger than everybody else, then I think that means a couple of things, right? It means one, that they should fight each other, right? Sooner rather than later, they should fight each other because that will be a great match for both of them, right? A fair fight for both of them. I think the other thing it means is that these top kingdoms need to think about a map like Stratagems more or Orleans maybe, because I think what would make the matchups interesting is the allies, right? Like if 1093 gets a stronger ally than 960, then I think that becomes a very interesting zone where they all fight together in. On either Orleans or Stratagems, you know, the zone 6s in those zones where it's generally like 3 or 4 camps that can get in. Do I have it right that in Orleans it's 3 camps? Well, so in Orleans, access to zone 6 depends a bit on what you do in zone 5, but you know, in both of those maps, there's like more. It's not a one-on-one. Like neither of those zone 6s are one-on-ones on that map. So like you can get some of these mismatched power kingdoms together in a KvK, and then based on the matchups and based on the map placement, you can get an interesting fight potentially. Now, what they could consider doing is having more of those maps give the option of picking where you start, right? Like I think what Britain did, King of All Britain did, where you can pick your starting location. I think that's really a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. And that's what got us this fight in zone 6 here. So a couple of comments about 93 here. Alice says 93's activity doesn't matter anymore with pilots. The quality of the accounts in 77 and 960 is too good. Yeah, that's a good point. Addy says 93 is in a good place apparently, so I think they are ready for it. Or maybe after 1 KvK because they need to beef up a little. Lore says it's hard to compete with the amount of speed ups everyone gets from just alliance chests. Accounts in those kingdoms get about 6 years of speeds from alliance gifts per KvK. Holy shit. They get 6 years? Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. 6 years of speed ups just from the alliance gifts. Wow. Yeah, I mean, you know. Yeah, listen, I don't really want to be in big kingdoms like this at all, honestly. I just... It's like almost a different game. I mean, obviously we deal with like pilots and stuff, and some accounts that have bottomless resources and speed ups in our KvKs, but like to deal with like 24/7 pilots and fight against like bottomless speed ups and resources, like to me, it's not really that interesting. Like I'm sure it's fun and it's like a challenge. It's a challenge in many ways to like keep people motivated to fight all the time, to like have a really strong pilot network, to keep all your whales happy. Like, look, what they're doing is extremely impressive, but it's just like it is a different game, right? I mean, if you have to care about your trades and you have to care about having finite resources and finite speed ups and a finite number of troops, then like your decisions in war are affected by those by that reality, right? And that makes it interesting. Like that makes it interesting. Like you have to find spots to like get good trades at some point. Like trades are obviously not everything. Like at any level of this game, trades are not everything. But like you have to, it has to be a factor in what you're doing. Like at our level, if someone is just swarming everything, like if a team is just swarming every single structure, right? Then if we do really good defense against that swarm, we can actually punish that kingdom enough where it might affect them and it might change the outcome of the war, right? So at that point, it becomes interesting for us to try and punish that swarm really hard. If like us punishing the swarm means nothing and they're going to be completely fine regardless, then it becomes way less interesting, right? And that actually happened in Kingsland against 2748, where like 2748 was completely fresh. We knew they were going to beat us. They had these huge whales, and we got some very interesting trades against the 2748 swarm, like some very interesting trades. And in all honesty, I forgot all about them. Like we were just talking about the game after this current war, and I think Algebra was like talking about what we did in the last KvK, and I had completely forgotten all about it. Like I had completely forgotten that we did all that stuff because it didn't matter at all. It made no difference. Like we had these like amazing trades, like very interesting reports, like so interesting that like I didn't want to share them in a video, but I forgot all about them because they made no difference. It made no difference in the KvK. You know, it was like an interesting experiment. It was like nice ROK porn to have these reports saved, but like it didn't matter. So I just forgot about it. Alice says RSS goes quick everywhere. I just spent so much lol. I was swarming everything though. It does go quick, and like troops can go quick. I mean, you know, like Chisgo was swarming a lot in his KvK. And I just thought it was interesting that they didn't punish Chisgo swarms at all, right? Like they were running like Eleanor garrisons in Kingsland. They were running like Hera primary garrisons in Kingsland. I was just like, man, if you know exactly what Chisgo's gonna do, like, I mean, you just gotta try to punish it. Like, you just, I don't think you can let people swarm for free in these smaller KvKs. Now, in a KvK like this, you know, like the one we're watching now, you probably just have to win the open field, right? Like I don't think you can punish the swarm of a flag in Kingsland enough, so you literally have to win the open field so the enemy cannot swarm you. But yeah, I mean, you have to punish people like Alloys, right? Like a big player in his KD. Just wear him out. Wear him out. Yeah, in this KvK, I don't think you can. Yeah, so stratagems. So lore in this KvK, though, the thing you got to think about in this KvK lore, though, is that you get 30% counterattack from stratagems. Right? Like all your marches, all the garrisons and all the rallies in this KvK have 30% of counterattack. So, and you have artifacts. You have 30% counterattacks, and you have artifacts. So you can create, and you have CY in the game now. You have CY, you have 30% embedded counterattack, and you have artifacts. So there is a lot of counterattack on this map. There's a lot of counterattack. And it makes the gameplay interesting, in my opinion, right? It makes the gameplay interesting, right? For kingdoms at our level, it makes the game interesting. And I think it can potentially make the game interesting at this level as well. I mean, we could see some crazy swarms of rallies. I mean, are these guys gonna like, okay, let's say that like, let's just say that the GT has the pass, right? And or no, let's say the 49 has the pass. GT's rallying it. 489 puts up a counter rally on GT's. 49 puts up a Martel Attila counter rally on GT. And 49 does like a really good job of keeping that Martel Attila counter rally full. Is GT going to swarm the crap out of that Martel Attila? Are they going to take a bunch of friggin' deads? Or are they just going to let that Martel Attila hit, right? I mean, we could potentially see some crazy counter rally reports in this KvK. Because I think both teams are going to swarm down counter rallies. And those counter rallies are going to be nasty. Like if you know GT is going to swarm down your counter rally, you obviously send Martel Attila. You obviously send that. And then you try to keep it full. And you potentially get like a crazy trade. Alloy's talking about his KvK in 1029, says, yeah, it was a ton of fun. Huge props to our enemy. They just wouldn't give up and wore us down and pushed our allies out. And then he says they had nothing left to keep going. Yeah, I mean, the KvKs where you get worn down are wild, right? We have definitely had some war of attrition KvKs for sure. We've lost war of attrition KvKs where like all that's left at the end are the whales for the enemy, and those whales just are nasty, you know? Like even in the war against 2217, at a certain point, like at night, so many of us will be down to like 2 marches, and then that Saul guy from 2217, he'd be out there with like 7 marches standing behind under his own flag. And it was just like so annoying to deal with that one whale who like probably still had a ton of speed ups, probably still had a ton of resources. Like in a war of attrition at the end, if you're like a whale who still has stuff left, you just dominate. You just dominate people. But yeah, at this high level, you just don't see wars of attrition. I can't remember the last time we've seen a kingdom at this level get worn out. Although maybe I just don't know about it. Addy says if 4 200 mil players are sat around a flag, building a Cho Hera with 430k T5 at a time, then the flag doesn't go down versus a Great Swarm. Yeah, I mean, if you can combine it with a little bit of open field that starts to pressure the enemy a little bit, that sort of like slowly whittles them away. I mean, I tend to agree. On the other hand, Lore says it doesn't matter. These KDs know how to swarm. People pull off at 320k troops. You won't trade positive in a flag unless you single troop fill, and then you'll not be able to keep it full. Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, these swarmers are so nasty at this level. You know, I mean, maybe and they probably do break off quite well. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, we did play against 2268, Lore. I mean, we played against 2268. Those guys then went and beat 2293. And then they beat 1365. So, I mean, like, I'm sure these players are better, but it's still ROK. It is still ROK. So, I would imagine the truth is somewhere in the middle of what Addy's saying and what Lore is saying. Lore says 60 GT micros the crap out of things like disciplined swarming. Yeah. I mean, the impression I've heard from the 60 GT voice is that it's just very very professional, like pretty quiet, like very few people talking. The thing I always forget is whether they have like I think their main voice chat is in English. I believe their main voice chat is in English, even if it's Chinese players leading it. So yeah, I can see that. I can see that they're like super disciplined about it. Um, yeah, I mean there are definitely levels to this, right? I mean 60 GT did not get into the position they're in by accident. They obviously execute on a very high level, but also have have players who can play at an extremely high level. Um, yeah, definitely would be interesting to be a. But they also have like a ton of pilots, right? So like, I mean, how many of these are great players, right? Like they've got 150 accounts, so that means they have like, you know, they've got 400 or 500 people probably involved in this kingdom. I mean, we've known people who have piloted in 60 GT. I mean, they're good players, but they're not like amazing. They're not necessarily like the perfect, they're not going to break off every swarm perfectly. And he says, well, the point is 249 can defend versus 960. Obviously depends on the assets of a kingdom. I mean, I will be very interested to see these forts and what happens at the forts. Because, I've had so much trouble getting swarmed in a fort, right? With my friggin' Eleanor. I had so much trouble getting swarmed in a fort. In this KvK, we did swarm some forts. Like, we did swarm some and got, like, okay trades. So I just wonder, I'll be very curious to see the past sevens and see if, like, 960 just ho-hum burns 489, or if, like, it's going to be hard for them to burn forts. I'll be very curious. I didn't really watch 1718 and how 1718 did versus 2377, but obviously this is a much closer matchup. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how 49 defends. It really will. The pilot network, the pilot and main player network that's happening here is just incredible. It is the game. I don't think I'm giving too much away to say that there have been some content, we have a content creator Discord, and there have been some content creators who have brought up the pilot issue. They make very good points. The best point that the best point that has been made about pilots is simply that it has very much changed what the biggest skills are in the game. Because it used to be that if you had a whale who was super dedicated and willing to play 16 hours a day, and they were good at controlling their own account, and you had like a team that was like very like together and they could motivate each other to like try really, really hard to win, that was like a huge skill in the game. And for an individual player, like your dedication to the game and your willingness to try really hard in the game, that is what separated you from everybody else, was how hard you tried. And now that's just kind of gone away. That's just kind of gone away. Like, because we have no clarity into how often the owner of the account is playing versus how often a pilot is playing. We have no clarity about whether the pilot is the one getting the amazing trades or the main account owner is getting the trades. We've got a little bit of that in RKD, a little bit. Not a lot, but just a little bit where like the pilots make the main account owner look real good. But in our case, it's still like the main account owner who's like doing the vast majority of things. And it's just kind of gone. It's just kind of gone in from the most high level KvKs. But Hum Farm says fights don't last long if there aren't pilots at this point, I feel. It depends on the level. I mean, listen, man, we've fought in multiple 3-week long wars where like neither team had very many pilots. I mean, like the Kingsland that Lore was in, I believe, lasted for like 3+ days, right? Like a pretty small KD. I think it was Heroic Anthem. I can't imagine there were that many pilots in Lore's KvK. I'm sure there were a decent amount, but not that many. And that fight lasted a long time. That fight lasted so long that we actually saw both sides competing at the Zig. Like the KL lasted long enough where there was a friggin' fight at the Zig, right? So I think a lot of KvKs can last long enough. It's just not these type of KvKs. Like these KvKs have nonstop open field. Like yeah, if it's a 24-hour open field, then obviously you need pilots or the KvK is not going to last long. Although in some ways it could last longer because people are getting worn out. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's going to be less fighting. If there's no pilots, there's going to be less fighting. So in that sense, the war should last longer. Yeah, I mean, listen, a smaller kingdom can leverage pilots. Like one small kingdom can leverage pilots way better than another. And then it's less about the strategy of the kingdom and it's more about how well you leverage pilots. So yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of issues with the game. Not gonna lie. We were having like so much fun in our Kingsland and we were all on voice and I forget exactly what we were talking about, but at one point I just said, lost in all the fun that we're having is that this game has a bunch of major problems right now. And it does. It definitely does. I mean, pilots, leader burnout, the amount of speed, unlimited speed ups versus very limited speed ups. Yeah, there's definite problems. I mean, but the thing for me, the thing is like sometimes you get into KvK where everything's like pretty fair, right? It didn't seem like our opponents in this KvK had a lot of pilots. We also did not have a lot of pilots. So it was just like a fair fight. We had some like really good open field fights. Like, we won some, 2650s camp won some. Like we had some big open field fights where like it was honestly a lot of fun and people got like, if you played good and had a good account, you got good trades. If you played bad and had a bad account, you got kind of bad trades. And it was like honestly like a fun KvK where like neither team was using a lot of pilots. So I just sort of hold out hope that I'm going to be able to get into more and more of those KvKs. But obviously sometimes you're going to run into a buzzsaw where like a kingdom spends a lot and has a lot of pilots and then they're just like very, very tough to deal with. It's happened to us before. It'll happen again. I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, Tipsy makes a good point as well. Even if small KDs can appoint pilots, do the accounts have sufficient RSS and speedups available? That's a very good point. Like, it really is a good point. Like, having a pilot network is easier said than done, in all honesty, right? It really is. It's easier said than done because, it's like you have to have the speedups, you have to have the resources, and you have to have pilots who care enough to play those accounts, who have the time and inclination to play those accounts. I mean, I'm like signed up as a pilot for a couple KDs, but I haven't piloted for them in over 6 months because I've just been very busy and I haven't had time, so it's like they can say they have a big pilot network, but if the pilots don't show up, then it doesn't matter, So like, yeah, getting those pilots to actually play for you is important. The thing I'm hearing now is that pilots are getting paid, right? I hear now that pilots get paid. So it's like, yeah, if you pay somebody like $5 an hour to pilot for you, like, like at that point, you're going to have a pilot network. Like like if we want to pay people $5 an hour to pilot for us, we could have a pilot network, I'm sure. Yeah, certain accounts do need pilots. But that, what we're getting at with all this is that it's all about accounts and it's not about strategy. It's not about strategy. It's not about vibes. It's not about outplaying your opponent. It's about account strength, pilot network, sufficient resources, and sufficient speed ups, right? It's almost like a preparation game rather than an execution game. And That's very different than almost all video games that exist, right? Like almost every video game in the world, including almost every single great video game that's ever existed, is mostly about execution. It's about playing well in the moment that the game is taking place. But all the things we're talking about that makes you good at Rise of Kingdoms is about like preparing ahead of time. You know, just be prepared ahead of time. Bring a bunch of people when the zone opens. I mean, everybody knows when a zone opens. Like they know when a zone opens. Like it's on the friggin' schedule, right? So like you just make sure everybody's online when the zone opens. You make sure they're online for that full day, that 12, 16-hour day. You crush your opponent on that first day. And like if your opponent is tough and they hang around, then like what will happen over time is that like you will wear down because your pilots will stop showing up day after day. You're going to be unwilling to pay people $5 an hour on day friggin' 6 of a war. You'll pay them on day 1, but you're not going to pay them on day 6. So like if a kingdom can hang around, they can slightly neutralize that pilot advantage. But like it's just such an easy thing to execute the day the pass is open. You make sure every single person's online, and then they just fight all day. I mean, it's all about preparation. It's not about playing the game, you know? And it's like, for me personally, like I've just played this game for a long time, and I'm just like, man, I kind of want to go and play a game that's about skill again. I just kind of want to see if I'm any good at them anymore. You know, I've gotten kind of back into gaming. I can make YouTube videos about any game I play, and I'm just sort of like, what would it be like to play a game that's entirely skill based, you know, or at least more skill based? Like the skills in this game are weird. I mean, there's a lot of skill in the game, but like the pilots can have skill too, you know. Eddie says in gembotting is just the norm now. Tipsy says, I do pilot for GT and 93 KvK. They have 3 decades of speed ups and 15 billion of each RSS, while average CC KDs only have 3 billion of each resource and 2 to 4 years of speeds. Laura says, you still have to execute, but this game has always been about KD and community building. Yeah, I mean, it's always been about that, for sure. It is. I mean, the game is the game, right? Like, there's a lot of good things about it, and there's also bad things about it. Like, no game is perfect. This game has done a lot, for sure. And I do think I'm going to continue playing it. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I'm definitely a little more open to the possibility of moving on than I used to be. Not gonna lie. Like, I just still really enjoy Arc, man. Like, to me, Arc is about execution, right? Like, Arc's not really about preparation. I mean, it's a little bit about preparation, but Arc is about like execution for that 1 hour of play, you know? And so that's why I really still get like a great buzz from Arc. And I still get a very good buzz from War, and I get and I do think there's a lot of skill involved in War, for sure. Like the teamwork aspect and all that is very skill based. I just know that I'm at a point where like it sucks to try really, really hard and lose and understand that you lost because the other team spent more money, had more pilots, or just had like the advantageous matchup, right? It's to put that kind of effort into like a war that you're going to just definitely lose. You know, to do the kind of thing that 1093 did in Alliance Invictus, like you can do that from like you can do that once or twice, but like after that, I'm just like F that, man. I'm just that's not interesting to me anymore. You know what I mean? Like if I were in 49's situation in this KvK, I don't know. I don't know how interesting it is. I don't know how interesting it is to be 49 in this KvK. Like what agency do you really have for your own fate? Like what control of your own fate does 489 really have here? I know I talked earlier about like Yeah, you can put on a good showing. You can put on a good showing for your people and give them content. Like, you have to give these people content. They've spent a ton of money. They've spent a ton of money to get where they are. You have to give them what they get now, right now, which is nonstop open field fighting. You have to give them some rallies and garrisons at the level 7 passes. But that takes a lot of friggin' work. It takes a lot of friggin' work to give people that content. It takes a lot of work to give people that content. And so leaders burn out and quit. They burn out and quit. And then kingdoms fall apart, and then kingdoms get smaller, and now every kingdom is very small. You know, the game is evolving. I mean, I think it's hard like, I'm curious what everybody in chat thinks, but it's hard for me to say that the game is evolving in a optimistic way. Well, I mean, some of the changes are good, like the quality of life changes are good, like the passport changes, the castle skin changes, the like resources in the home kingdom, the barbs in the home kingdom. Okay, those things are good. They're making it better for the smaller player. But like, is Siege making this game better? Like, are more Siege marches making this game better? I don't think they are. Are more pilots making this game better? No. Are fewer kingdoms making this game better? No. Are leaders quitting making this game better? No. So, I mean, there's some positive stuff. Like, new graphics would be good. I look forward to new graphics. These new maps have been good. Like, Stratagems is a good map. King of Britain is a good map. Like, Stratagems and Britain are like two of the newest maps, and they're probably the two best maps, right? Like, the two newest maps are probably the two best maps, so that's good. I mean, there are plenty of good things. There are. Addy says paying pilots is rare. Lol. How many people are paying? I don't know. Someone like newer player who like has like done a little bit of piloting for us in the past. I was talking to him about piloting, and he said that like everybody gets paid, but I mean he's newer, so I don't know. Dan Carson said, I personally don't enjoy playing when I know I'm going to lose. I enjoy it a little bit, Carson. I enjoy it. I'm able to enjoy it a little bit because like you can still have small victories within that, and you can still like play well as a team. But I enjoy it way more if I'm winning. Like, if I'm winning in this game, I love it. I'm in a very good mood generally if we're winning. I mean, I'll get pissed here and there, but I'm pretty chill. I'm a pretty chill guy when we're winning. Adinavo says it depends. The skill is not reflexes and accuracy. The skill is teamwork and coordination in the field, and like 5D chess on the rally garrison building. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's it's true, but like, yeah, that's all true. I mean, that's all true, Eddie. That's all true. There's plenty of skill in the game. There is plenty of skill, but HDT Nation says Adinavo totally nerding out as if he's still playing. I mean, listen, if Leopard can come back, Addy can come back. But, you know, the thing is, I mean, Addy or Leopard came back to like a kingdom that was just as strong as when he left. So that's the really nice situation that Leopard was in. So we'll see. We'll see. Zip. Well, you know, the title says it all. We won our KvK, but our R5 did retire, so we're just adjusting to that, you know what I mean? We've got an uncertain future, but we're gonna finish up the KvK that we won. We're gonna collect our rewards. We're gonna go back to the home kingdom where there are now level 9 resource tiles and level 10 barb forts and level 40 barbs. We're gonna, you know, do some recovery, although we're pretty fresh. we'll go into another KvK and see how it goes. It's going to be tough without our R5 because he was our best player by far. But, you know, life goes on. Hum Farm says Leopard kept piloting in 1960 after he left, though. It wasn't like he ever left for good. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, making leadership easier, like tracking stuff would be so good, right? Like, it's really good that Fleisch has his dashboards now, because maybe I still need to look into it a little bit more, but I mean, maybe we can keep track of, you know, KD contribution during a war. Maybe we can just keep track of that through Fleisch's dashboard. That would be a really good way for us to, you know, keep track of things going forward, because in the past we've always done the stats ourselves, but Addy did those stats. So like if Fleisch has a third party solution, that would be like super helpful. I mean, they you know what they could do is they could make the bankroll an official function in the game. They could allow you to make a particular city a bank, and then the game could track when people donate resources to the bank, right? They could track when people donate resources to the bank, and then we would not have to track that manually. They could even have it so that bank resources are automatically distributed to players. Like every kingdom has one city where you can distribute the resources automatically. People don't have to do it by hand. The bank automatically sends resources to an assigned city. All that stuff would save a ton of work for leaders. Ton of work. And they got to look at making things easier for leaders, because that is a problem that exists in the game, like for sure. I'm probably going to do a video at some point that's going to be thumbnailed, should Lilith pay R5s? And I'm going to talk about the impact, the financial impact to Lilith on Addy quitting the game. The financial impact on him quitting the game is going to be massive. It's going to be a massive amount of money. It really is. I mean, if we keep 770 going, then it won't be that big of a deal. But like, if things go bad and people quit the game, it's going to be like, listen, him quitting, I would bet on average, in expectation, Addy quitting the game is likely going to cost Lilith, I don't know, $15,000 a year, something like that, like $10,000 to $15,000 a year, at, you know, like on average. Sometimes it's going to be lower and sometimes it's going to be higher, but on average, him quitting is going to cost Lilith like 10 to 15 grand a year, right? So like, the fact that he didn't get compensated at all for how much money he brought into the game, he didn't get compensated at all. It's just like one of those things. I mean, they're never going to pay R5s. It's like a troll kind of thumbnail, but you know, we are very gradually moving into a different era of gaming. Web3 gaming is starting to get a little bit bigger. There are ways to monetize assets and monetize ownership of assets in games. And ROK is just like a very good example of that, of like how game developers can be incentivized to share the profits of the game with the player base. And like, leaders quitting this game is like a great example of that, because when a leader quits this game, it's taking money out of Lilith's pocket. 100%, no doubt about it. And he says tiered deaths on the profile, unlimited officer positions, better domain sign up. There's so much they can do. Transfer limit will go from 5 to 10 million soon also. Yeah, actually, in this KvK, in the King of All Britain KvK, there's a stratagem that expands the transfer limit from 5 million to 10 million. When I discovered that, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Oh, hell yeah. That literally saves, like, that cuts my time in half transferring resources to people. Like, I spent so much time in the last KvK, like the one before this, I spent so much time transferring resources. Like, it's crazy how many hours I spent doing it. And like, I knew we were going to lose. I knew we were going to lose. I just had no work. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll do this like all day. I guess I'll spend like this entire day transferring resources to people and like, magnify my carpal tunnel. So like, yeah, I mean, that's a great change. Increasing the transfer limit, like doubling the transfer limit is great. Yeah, so I mean, listen, like the game definitely has a chance. It definitely does. It definitely does. I mean, people are having fun. There's been a bunch of good KvKs recently. This one will probably be a good KvK. We had a good KvK. Kane and Omniarch had a good KvK. Lambo had a good KvK. My impression is that 1079 and 2217 had a good KvK. I was surprised that 2217 lost that KvK, but it sounds like it was a good one. There's been a lot of good wars lately. I'm not too sure if the 1824 2748 KvK is going to be a good one. Really not sure. Not sure how good the 1875 2975 KvK was. It seems like with that one there was just like a bunch of drama, and then KL was just a blowout. So I don't think we would call that a good war. But yeah, there have been a bunch of good wars lately on some of these new maps, and the artifacts and the extra counterattack, they do enhance the gameplay, in my opinion, definitely. I think more counterattack damage is certainly interesting. We'll have to see more of it to see how it manifests itself in all ways, but yeah, they've made the game itself better in a lot of ways, for sure. Gosu says we are having a bad time. Yeah, I mean, I'm planning to maybe cast. If I'm not wrong, Gosu, your past sevens open on like Christmas Eve or something. I'm gonna keep an eye on that and maybe broadcast some of that one. Adinavo says, my issue is it's getting better at a rate that isn't reasonable when compared to the reason why leaders will be quitting. Big changes needed fast. Yeah, I don't. I mean, obviously there are ways they can make things easier, but I don't think that like the fundamental issues with leadership can be fixed. The fundamental issue with leadership is that if you don't work super hard and super smart as a leader, then the other team's leader might, and then they're going to beat you, and then you're going to feel like crap, and people are going to blame you, and your kingdom's going to fall apart, and you can't play with the game with your friends anymore. Like, that's the problem with leadership, and I don't think that's ever going to change. I think it's a competitive game, and there's just always going to be some leaders who try really hard and beat everybody else. I mean, what really has to happen is the game has to fall off so much, and so many leaders have to quit that like you go into KvKs where like everyone is kind of casual, right? You have to go into a KvK where everybody's like withered and like doesn't want to try that hard. So then everyone can be chill. You know, like if you have two teams, right? And they're like fighting, they've got like flags touching each other, right? And neither team has any real guidance. Like, they've got people on voice, but they don't really have anybody who's like updating markers and like telling people what to do. It's just like a group of people on each team who are playing. At that point, I think you have a pretty fun fight, because like, people might try to like rally a flag. People might just fight in the open field. People might try to build a flag to like flank the enemy or something. But like in both cases, you have like neither team like playing at 100%. You have both teams playing at like 70%. So like if we all play at 70%, if we all just play for like 8 hours a day, if every single like officer in this game is like, I'm only going to play for 8 hours a day, and like for the other hours of the day we're just not going to be that good, then like it's still a good fight and it's a fun game, and we're not like killing ourselves for it. So I kind of think we have to get to that point. I think it might take like a friggin' decade to get to that point, but it would be nice. It would be nice if like everyone stops trying. Lore says, with the smaller KDs, we should get smaller maps. The zones are so big, it is a huge strain on the territory leads. Could be, could be. I know in zone. I know that in this zone, was it this zone? Did we go into this zone or no? We went into Gloucester. But yeah, in this basic zone, right? Like when we were fighting in this zone, we decided to like flank our enemies on both sides. And we reached a point where we had so many touch points that it was friggin' insane. Like we had so many touch points that like no, it was like really aggravating for any sort of leadership team to deal with like all those touch points. So I mean, yeah, smaller zone. I mean, maybe, I don't know. The thing is, like the only way a smaller KD beats a bigger KD is in a big zone. Like a smaller KD can't win a small zone against a bigger KD. Yeah, people in chat are talking about letting anyone schedule events like Silk Road or Karawak. Same events for 4 years. I'll be honest, I didn't do Golden Kingdom the last 2 times it came up. I normally do all the events, but I've missed Golden Kingdom many, many times this year. I've probably not done Golden Kingdom this year more often than I've done it. I mean, the farming thing is whatever at this point. I mean, to me, farming is... I mean, farming gets into the money of it, right? Like, how much money we pay to play this game is also an issue. Like, we pay so much money to play this game, it's crazy. I was supposed to play Ashes of Creation this weekend. Like, Ashes of Creations is a upcoming MMORPG. It's going to be a very PvP-oriented and team-oriented MMORPG. I have not played an MMO in a extremely long time, but Ashes of Creation actually looks like quite cool. So my plan was like, it's basically the holidays. I figured I might be done with work, so I'm just gonna like play Ashes of Creation all weekend and just like get a sense of what other games are like, because this is the only game I've played for like a really long time. I just want to kind of get a sense of other games and see if I like how much fun I have in them. I ended up having to work all weekend, which is fine, but I'm probably gonna play Ashes next week. I don't know if I'll stream it, but yeah, over the holiday break and stuff, I'm gonna play another different game and just sort of see what it's like for me. And then just like assess where I go from there. I mean, I've been having fun lately. Like I had fun in this KvK. Didn't think I was going to take it too seriously, but then ended up playing quite a bit. So, we'll see how it goes. Make some videos, see if I enjoy making some videos. I still really like Ark of Osiris. I still want to cast. I'm gonna always try to stay pretty involved in ROK just because I really enjoy casting Ark. So, I'm gonna always like keep doing it, but we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Lore says I'd prefer smaller Z5s and a slightly bigger KL. The endless fort blocks are not enjoyable for anyone. Well, now that we lost Addy, I would prefer no fort blocks also, because we're going to suck at them. But, I mean, I think in a zone like this, right? Like, here, Addy, I don't think you were on the stream earlier, but I was looking down here, because, I think they are building a fort now, right? Yep, so they're building one fort, because, 1262 is getting burned over here. And I was just looking at this, and I was like, it looks like they could probably fort block all of this. I don't know if this fort is going to do it. Maybe that's perfect. Maybe this fort is perfect. I don't know. But I was just looking at this, and I was like, they could probably put a resource center here. Although they need to do it like real fucking quick. Sorry. They need to do it real. Are they just letting them through here? Like, to me, it looked like here. I guess they can't block it, right? Because they can just hop right over and build over here. I guess you had to build a fort here earlier, maybe? I don't know. I was looking at this and I'm like, all right, choke point here, choke point here, choke point here. You know, maybe not a choke point down here, but at least you can block off a bunch of this. And I don't know. I just think lore, you know, like you said, this is a game of kingdom and community building. And so I just think that if a kingdom has gotten to this point where they're in a big KvK like this, they've worked hard to build a strong kingdom, you know, they're outmatched against the elites of the game. I think they should be able to block the enemy's progress here. And like, you know, if you want to rally into our forts, then we have like we've got ourselves a game again, right? I think, you know, I think that a kingdom that has gotten to this point deserves the opportunity to properly place a fort wall here. Now, not everybody can do it. Not everybody can do it. Addy says, I would say like 5 kingdoms are good at forting in the entire game. To be fair, I'm pretty sure 1824 put up a fort wall that, I'm not sure. It looked to me at first like 1824 put up a fort wall that lasted. If we go into their zone now, I think we're going to see that that fort wall went down, but we can take a look. Yeah, I mean, you know, 2293 built a fort wall, you know? Yeah, it looks like it's gone. Looks like the 1824 fort wall is gone, but there was 1824 did have a fort wall, you know, right around this area here, but obviously it did get broken. If I'm looking at the right zone, I think I am. Yeah. What's happening here? Wait, who has the zone? Oh, maybe they were on top. Maybe their fort wall was on top, I guess. I guess it's a pretty hard fort wall to maintain, this whole zone. I forget exactly what I was looking at. Never mind. But anyway, they had a fort wall. They had a quote-unquote fort wall set up for a while. Obviously, at this point, it's been broken. Although it looks like they haven't pushed them out of this zone entirely yet, which is interesting. Even to this day, 2748 has not pushed 1824 out of this zone? Question mark? Why is 1824 still in this zone? That's pretty weird. And people are farming freely? What happened here? What happened here? Anyway. I do appreciate the chat being so lively tonight. That was awesome. That made my job so easy. Thank you, Lore, so much for hanging out. Addy for being here. Irgandir Alloys. Dan Carson. Thank you, of course, to Barney, Seba, and Algebra for being here. That guy checking in. We had a good stream for sure. Yeah, that zone seemed pretty easy to do. I mean, I think all fort walls are hard, personally. You got to put a lot of time into them. You got to make sure there's no holes in them. Eddie, I said some nice things about you at the start of the stream. You know, I'm going to miss you, buddy, for sure. I know I was pretty brief when you told me. But, you know, you've known me for 6 years, so I assume you know that I'm a bit of a cold and aloof person, but yeah, man, I'm going to miss you a lot in this game. Everybody's going to miss you. But what I did say earlier was that I consider it a good thing. I think it's good you're moving on with your life. I think you went out on top. I think you have nothing left to prove. The only thing I wish we had done, the only kind of KvK I wish we had done was one where we were in like a really big Imperium KvK and we were like a support alliance in that KvK. We were like a third party, far from the most important or far from the most impactful kingdom. I would have loved to have played in a KvK like that in 770 when we're at the top of our game with you leading us, just to see what would have happened, right? Just to see how much of an impact we could have had on that sort of a KvK. But I think we won every other kind of war that we wanted to fight in. The 2268 war definitely is going to make our like legacy and our memories of the game feel a lot better, because that was like we proved ourselves in a different way in that one. But yeah, man, you know, it's yeah, dude. I mean, you are my best gaming friend I've ever had. I've been a gamer for 30 years, and you're the best gaming friend I've had. We've accomplished the most of anybody that I've played games with. So yeah, I'm gonna miss you, bro, for sure. And you know, I'll be making more videos about this KvK. I might even go back and make some videos about some other KvKs. So if you ever want to get a perspective on what you did, that's part of the reason why I made these videos, is because I knew what we were doing was very cool. Mad Mania, another leader checking in. We're doing good, mate. We're doing good, Mad. We're definitely doing good. Heard you guys had a very good KvK as well. Hopefully all your leaders stay involved. We're going to lose our main leader, but you know, Addy built a very, very good community that's going to continue on without him in one form or another, and I think that's a very good legacy to leave behind. We're chilling in Kingsland right now after winning a KvK where everybody had a great time. So not a lot more you can ask for out of the game than that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching a you know, yet another live stream. I appreciate everybody in chat for being so active. I wasn't sure how long this one would go. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I think I said everything I needed to. And yeah, until next time, I'll see you all on the flip side.